Chapter 21. After only a few days of cultivation, Ye Tian found himself frustrated. It wasn't that his progress was slow, quite the opposite, but the physical movements required by a martial practitioner's training were simply too forceful for his tiny room. There were only 9 forms in the set, yet each one sent shockwaves through the air. If he wasn't careful, he could easily break things. This wasn't just about broken furniture. Their apartment sat on the edge of the base. If a fierce beast ever breached the perimeter, this sector would be the first to be hit. Ye Tian wasn't frightened for himself, but his younger sister hadn't begun cultivation yet and had no way to defend herself. He would be venturing outside into the wild more and more as he trained. He couldn't risk leaving her vulnerable. He made up his mind. They had to move into the small villa district at the center of the base. It was the safest area. Nothing there would be affected unless the entire base fell, but safety came at a staggering price. Even the smallest villa cost 10 million yuan, an amount far beyond the reach of ordinary families. Ye Tian still had 2 million yuan in cash on him. Between that and the borrowing power his new status as a warrior gave him at the base bank, it would be enough to buy a small villa. At lunchtime, he told his younger sister Ye Yu, "Little Rain, I'm planning to move into the small villa area in the center of the base. I checked it out. The central garden community looks really nice." Ye Yu's eyes went wide. She stepped forward and pressed her hand against his forehead. "Brother, you don't have a fever, do you? A small villa in the central garden costs at least 10 million. That's not something we can afford." Ye Tian ruffled her hair and grinned. "Where did you get such pessimistic ideas?" Then, with a flourish, he set 2 gold cards on the table. "Here, 2 million. And since I'm officially a warrior now, the base bank will lend the rest." "Brother, you're a warrior already?" Ye Yu covered her mouth, stunned. She could still remember how he'd only been cultivating for half a year. Becoming a warrior so fast seemed impossible. "I've just broken through, but don't tell anyone," Ye Tian said quickly. "After all, your brother's a genius. What if people get jealous of our family?" Brother, I promise I won't tell." Ye Yu nodded repeatedly, her eyes shining with joy and pride at having such a talented brother. Over the next few days, Ye Tian took care of the purchase formalities. In this era, there was no deed registration, only a contract to sign. The small villas were sold refurbished, but the so-called decoration was very basic, more like an old courtyard than the modern villa Ye Tian had pictured. Maybe the larger developments could afford contemporary designs, but the coastal complexes could not. The cost was simply too high. The one relief was the size. The property included a small courtyard of about 50 square meters, 5 bedrooms, 2 living rooms, 2 bathrooms, and the whole villa totaled roughly 400 square meters. The place was a modest villa tucked into the coastal base. Space wasn't the problem there. When the base was built, it had been laid out on a huge scale, but only a few 100,000 people had ever lived there, so houses and land were plentiful. Once Ye Tian finished the purchase, he began moving in. There wasn't much to bring. In half a day, he and his sister had settled into the little house in the central garden district. The villa wasn't truly his, though. It was mortgaged. If Ye Tian fell in battle or failed to repay the loan, the property would be repossessed. That's why he was determined to clear the debt as soon as possible. 8 million yuan was no small sum. Even for a warrior, it would normally take a long time to earn. Most martial artists would estimate 10 years or more. Ye Tian, however, believed it wouldn't take him that long. At the rate he hunted beasts, he was confident he could pay it off much sooner. For the next half-month, Ye Tian hunted in the wild every day. He picked the smaller ferocious beasts and brought his kills straight back to the base. Each beast sold for around 200,000 yuan, so after 15 days, he had earned roughly 3 million. Most cultivators wouldn't dare hunt like that, not because they lacked strength, but because it was far too risky. Who could guarantee they'd come back safely each time? A single encounter with a powerful beast could be fatal. Ye Tian could afford the gamble because his speed was exceptional. Even in the early stage of the warrior tier, he moved faster than many late-stage warriors. Combined with his shadow talent, he could strike and withdraw before most opponents could react. After that frenzied stretch of hunting, he decided to lie low and focus on cultivation for a while. He stayed inside the base, recuperating and pushing his training as hard as he could. In the blink of an eye, another half-month passed. Because he had drunk enough fierce beast blood and possessed unusually high cultivation talent, Ye Tian's power had risen dramatically. He could now exert 2,000 pounds of force, and his skin had toughened to the point where ordinary fine iron blades could barely pierce it. In another life, he might have even been able to stop a bullet with his flesh, but there were no bullets in this age. That morning, he returned to the black market, not to sell beast parts, but to buy. The stalls were the usual chaos of hawkers and shadowy dealers. Ye Tian threaded through them until he reached a familiar stall and called out, "Wuge, I want to buy a map of the Lake of Death." The Lake of Death lay about 10 kilometers from the coastal base, ringed by dangerous wildlife. It had earned its name because the lake's waters hid terrifying aquatic beasts. Even elite warriors rarely came back alive from there. Ye Tian had one reason for risking it. A rare aquatic fierce beast lived in those waters, the lighthouse jellyfish, and he wanted it badly. Before the Yuanqi era, the lighthouse jellyfish was a tiny marine creature. Then came the Yuanqi era, and the species underwent a dramatic metamorphosis. No longer confined to the sea, it shed its environmental limits and became far more resilient. A few inland lakes now harbor them, most notoriously the Lake of Death, which swarms with lighthouse jellyfish. These jellyfish are an earth-dwelling species, not one of the ferocious beasts that spill through the spatial rifts, yet their power is terrifying. Individuals have grown many times their original size, some reaching the dimensions of a human hand. They are extremely difficult to kill. Even seasoned warriors struggle to put them down. Their tentacles can pierce a warrior's flesh, and it is said that when a group of lighthouse jellyfish appears, even elite fighters will turn and run. Standing their ground is almost always a death sentence. When Ye Tian saw the formidable lighthouse jellyfish, he immediately recognized the value of its abilities. It almost certainly possessed innate talents for healing and regeneration, powers that, if he could copy them, would boost his survivability by several levels. Traveling to the Lake of Death would be dangerous, but given the potential reward, the risk suddenly seemed worth it. Chapter 22. The Lake of Death map comes in two versions, a 10,000-piece map and a 100,000-piece map. Which does the warrior want? The female clerk asked, her tone serious. What's the difference? Ye Tian asked. The 10,000-piece map only shows the general terrain and a basic overview, she explained. The 100,000-piece map is far more detailed. It even lists types of aquatic beasts that inhabit the lake and describes their weaknesses. Give me the 100,000-piece map, Ye Tian said. 100,000 coins meant little to him, and it was better to know as much as possible about the Lake of Death to avoid unnecessary dangers. After paying 100,000 coins and receiving the map, he bought some healing supplies. The 3 bottles of Qingyuan liquid he had purchased earlier were top-tier medicines. He had already used one. He didn't need to restock that level of healing now, but he did buy more ordinary remedies. It would be wasteful to use Qingyuan liquid on minor scratches. After buying the supplies, Ye Tian gave Yeyu his instructions and left the coastal base. 10 kilometers wasn't an easy walk. He moved carefully, taking his time, and it took him half a day to reach the place called the Lake of Death. As he drew near, a crash of noise rolled out across the basin, clashing steel, grunts, and a sharp shout. Someone! Ye Tian's brow tightened. The Lake of Death was notorious and remote. It wasn't the kind of place even elite martial artists bothered to go hunting. Why would fighters be here? He forced himself to calm. Be careful, he reminded himself. His expression darkened. In the coastal base, warriors could more or less tolerate one another. But out in the wild, the rules were different. Resources and territory turned allies into rivals in an instant. There were far too many stories of disputes erupting into bloodshed. He slowed to a crawl, feet whispering through the undergrowth, moving almost soundlessly toward the lake. The terrain here was strange. A great lake sat in the middle of a ring of low mountains, more like rolling hills than peaks. The slopes were thick with trees, and shadows pooled in every hollow. That suited Ye Tian. With the cover of the woods and his talent for slipping into darkness, he could melt into the scenery and watch without being seen. Hidden in the shadows, Ye Tian watched intently. Soon a group of figures came into view, and among them he recognized Yue Ling, the same woman he had seen at the Wu Pavilion. They were fighting near the Lake of Death, surrounded by savage beasts. The battle was brutal. Ye Tian's heart leapt when he saw the creatures up close. Giant crocodile beasts, each roughly 10 meters long, clearly mid-level fierce beasts. But towering above them was a monster nearly 20 meters in length. Every step it took made the ground tremble. There was no doubt in Ye Tian's mind. That enormous crocodile was a high-level fierce beast, the kind of opponent that counted as a great warrior among cultivators. An old man was locked in combat with it, trading blows without either side gaining the upper hand. From the way he held his own against such a leviathan, Ye Tian knew the old man's cultivation had to be at the great warrior level as well. 10 elite martial artists flanked Yue Ling, with a single great martial artist standing among them, clearly her bodyguards. Ye Tian frowned. Why would such a powerful escort be gathered at the Lake of Death? Could the lake contain what Yue Ling sought? He stayed hidden and watched, not revealing himself. Then someone burst out of the Lake of Death, a middle-aged warrior who strode across the water as if it were solid ground, his clothes completely dry. Ye Tian guessed at once, a water talent. Useful in the lake, no doubt, but not something he cared to copy. What he wanted most right now was the talent of the lighthouse jellyfish. "Miss, it's here. Let's go." The middle-aged man shouted, panic in his voice. He moved with astonishing speed, reached the shore in an instant, and pressed something into Yue Ling's hands. Ye Tian was too far away to make out the object, but even from a distance it gleamed like an extraordinary treasure, likely the reason they'd risked coming to the Lake of Death. Suddenly, the water of the Lake of Death erupted. A gigantic crocodile surged up out of the depths, its bulk more like an ancient dragon than any ordinary reptile. A crushing pressure rolled away from it for thousands of meters. Even Ye Tian felt the air thicken and cling to his skin. "What the hell did they anger?" Ye Tian whispered, horrified. It finally clicked for him. The high-level crocodile they'd fought before hadn't been the leader at all, only a lieutenant. This massive beast was the true alpha. "Miss, it's a top-level fierce beast," the old man said, his face going pale. "You need to get out of here. Now, we'll hold it off." "Let's go," someone else shouted. Yue Ling ground her teeth. "Too late," she snapped, but even as she spoke, the old man looked desperate. They hadn't expected a creature of this caliber in such a remote spot. A top-level fierce beast like this was the sort of threat only a master could handle. They were only 2 senior martial artists, him and that middle-aged man, nowhere near enough to stop an apex beast. The old man's voice broke into frantic, disjointed shouts as he tried to marshal them. Panic and disbelief rippled through the group. It was clear they had no real answer for what had just emerged from the lake. An elite warrior didn't hesitate. He plunged straight at the lead giant crocodile and threw himself into a suicide attack. As soon as the old man shoved Yue Ling clear, he and the middle-aged man sealed the last barrier between them and the beasts. Yue Ling glanced back and realized at once there was no way she could save the others. If she stayed, they would all die here. Reluctantly, she turned to leave, but the crocodiles had other plans. One after another, they gave chase, closing in fast. Yue Ling dared not stop. She ran with everything she had. "She's so fast, so powerful. Her cultivation must be at the peak of the elite ranks. She could kill me in a second." Ye Tian thought, watching her. Even so, no matter how strong Yue Ling was, a lone fighter was unlikely to defeat an entire pack of giant crocodiles. Their guards were helpless against the top-tier beasts, and there simply wasn't much time. Desperation pushed her further. Rumble. A fierce aura, one belonging to a great martial artist, erupted from Yue Ling's body. She cast a covert technique and forced her strength upward, pushing herself to the level of a great warrior. This ascension was only temporary. Once the occult technique ran its course, she would instantly fall into a frail, helpless state, and then she would die. "Die!" Yue Ling shouted, driving her sword through the skull of a giant crocodile. She followed with a savage kick that sent another beast flying. For a brief, brilliant moment, her power surged, and she cut through the attackers like a storm. But there were too many of them. A massive croc slammed into her from the side, throwing her through the air. She landed hard, pain flaring through her body. She ran and ran, chased relentlessly. Eventually, the horde thinned out. She couldn't tell how far she'd fled, only that there were no more crocodiles close behind. That should have been a relief, but she was badly wounded, each breath a ragged effort. Then her face changed. "No, the occult technique's time is up," she gasped. Despair washed over her. She was out here in the wild, far from any shelter. When the technique ended, she would be visibly weakened, likely unconscious, and a single remaining beast would be enough to kill her. Before she could think of any answer, her vision blurred. Her knees gave out and she collapsed to the ground. As consciousness slipped away, a figure seemed to materialize at her side. Chapter 23. Yueling opened her eyes to darkness and a raw, aching silence. For a moment she didn't know where she was, or if she was still alive. The last thing she remembered had been a blur of claws and roaring. She had been sure she'd been killed. The fact that she could think at all told her she'd been rescued. "Are any of my guards still alive?" she tried to ask, but the question died on her lips. Against those apex beasts, her entourage hadn't stood a chance. A presence moved at her side, and a soft, slightly boyish voice breathed, "You're awake!" She could not make out his face in the dimness, but the voice was familiar. Relief and recognition warmed her despite the pain. "Ye Tian, you saved me?" She attempted to push herself up and failed. The effort left her dizzy and weak. "That's right," came the reply. "I saw you fall and brought you into this little cave." "Thank you," Yueling managed, gratitude plain in her voice. Ye Tian shrugged, a small, embarrassed smile she could hear. It was nothing, just happened to be nearby. The smile in his voice held a flicker of something else, a private admission. He'd thought, for a moment, about leaving her and taking the valuables she'd been carrying. In the end, his hand hadn't moved toward her things. He couldn't bring himself to do it. Yueling's nature seemed genuinely decent. Her refusal to join the martial pavilion had made that clear, and the others hadn't overreacted. If it had been someone like Mo Xiaobei in her place, they wouldn't have offered help. They'd have shoved her into the well without a second thought. A soft glow sprang from Yueling's palm. It was a stone, but it shone like a lantern and instantly lit the dark cave. Ye Tian blinked in surprise. He had carried Yueling this far and hadn't noticed any such stone before. If it had been there, he would have sensed it. "This is a light stone," Yueling said, not bothering to hide it. "It stores light. They're very rare. Even among those at the Great Foundation stage, only a few possess one." She sounded unguarded, unconcerned about Ye Tian's curiosity. The stone was rare but not particularly valuable, and she wouldn't object if he wanted a piece. She set the light stone on a nearby ledge. Almost at once, a small vial of healing liquid materialized in her hand. Yueling tipped it back, drank, and then sat quietly as the potion began to mend her wounds. It suddenly clicked for Ye Tian. Yueling hadn't produced the healing bottle from nowhere. Nothing could appear out of thin air. She must be carrying one of those legendary storage pouches on her person. And the potion itself was far superior to his Qingyuan liquid. He'd given her a bottle of his Qingyuan liquid while she was unconscious. It had only eased her wounds. Yueling's medicine, by contrast, healed her skin visibly, almost before his eyes. Sensing his scrutiny, Yueling smiled. "You haven't seen the storage pouch. It's made from the space pouch of a space kangaroo, then refined a bit by a martial artist with spatial talent. That's why a martial artist can use it to store things." "What's a space kangaroo?" Ye Tian asked. From Yueling's explanation, he finally understood. A space kangaroo is a high-level fierce beast, incredibly fast, enormously powerful, and unusually intelligent, one of the hardest creatures to hunt. The pocket of the space kangaroo has a spatial attribute. It can hold vast amounts of stuff. That pocket is called a space pocket. If a space-talented warrior hunts a space kangaroo, they can refine that space pocket into a storage bag. It isn't the only way to create a storage bag. Any object with spatial attributes can be refined the same way. But the kangaroo's pocket is the most practical and the easiest raw material to obtain. Ye Tian couldn't help but sigh inwardly. No wonder he'd never heard of this before. He came from a small outpost like Linhai Base, and simply hadn't had access to the resources or knowledge of the larger bases. It was unfair to expect someone from a minor base to know everything the bar, e.g. bases, took for granted. For the next 2 days, Ye Tian stayed with Yue Ling. Yue Ling's wounds hadn't fully healed, and Ye Tian wasn't confident enough in his own abilities to go off alone hunting the lighthouse jellyfish. It felt like wasted time, but it wasn't fruitless. Yue Ling filled the gap in his knowledge, teaching him many things he'd never learned before, such as the realms beyond the Great Warrior. The hierarchy at the coastal base was small and tight. A great martial artist, there was the strongest presence. Only 1 or 2 could be seen openly, and even the hidden great martial artists rarely numbered more than a few dozen. But in the main base, the scale was completely different. A great martial artist there was only a mid-level fighter. Above that stood the master-level martial artists. A master could sweep through a group of great martial artists with ease, and their lives stretched far beyond ordinary limits, some living up to 200 years. When Ye Tian learned that master-level fighters could live to be 200, he froze. A new target burned in him, to break through into the sect master realm. It was an ambitious aim. The odds were brutal. Disciples with decent cultivation talent had under a 10% chance, and only those with truly exceptional talent even approached that 10% mark. Ye Tian, I'm ready to return to the main base, Yue Ling said once his injuries had almost completely healed. Then be careful on the way, Ye Tian replied. Just before she left, Yue Ling tossed a small package to Ye Tian. I think you'll be able to use what's inside, so I'm sending it to you, she said. Before Ye Tian could refuse, she was already gone. Gone so quickly he didn't even have time to react. He could only smile helplessly to himself. When he opened the package, he nearly dropped it. Inside were a secret manual, intermediate Yuanli forging body technique, 10 vials of high-grade ferocious beast blood, and 10 gold cards worth a total of 10 million yuan. The gift was astonishingly generous. The most valuable item was the manual. Ye Tian had no idea whether the prominent families of Linhai Base owned a copy. Ordinary martial artists could never obtain something like this. No amount of money could buy it. Coupled with the 10 bottles of powerful beast blood, it was exactly what he needed. A surge of confidence rose in him. With the intermediate Yuanli forging body technique and those 10 vials of beast blood, there was no doubt in his mind. Within 3 months, he would reach the elite martial artist rank. At first, he had planned to go straight to the Lake of Death to hunt down the lighthouse jellyfish, but he changed his mind. It made more sense to wait until he'd been promoted to elite warrior, far safer. Besides, this wasn't the right moment. Yue Ling and the others had just made a major move in the lake, and the local predators were probably on edge and watching for any outsiders. Going now would be courting death. In 3 months, the waters should have settled. That would be the perfect time to return. So Ye Tian decided to head back to the coastal base and wait. Chapter 24. The trip back to the coastal base was uneventful, and Ye Tian arrived safely. The next day, he went to the black market and bought dozens of vials of intermediate fierce beast blood, spending nearly 10 million yuan. He could have used that money to clear his loan without difficulty, but he chose the blood instead. Although he still had 10 vials of high-grade fierce beast blood, relying solely on the high-grade stuff wouldn't last him 3 months. The most effective plan was to use the high-grade vials sparingly for breakthroughs and rely on intermediate blood to maintain and assist his cultivation most of the time. In the small courtyard of his villa, Ye Tian began practicing the intermediate Yuanli forging body method. Like the low-level version, it consisted of only 9 movements, but each one was far more mysterious and complex, demanding much greater precision and control. The intermediate elemental force forging body method unfurled before him, and a flood of rich yuanqi rushed into Ye Tian's body. The refining speed instantly outstripped the low-level Yuanli forging body method by a wide margin. It's 3 times better than the low-level method. Ye Tian breathed, astonished. If this was only from the method itself, he thought, then using ferocious beast blood to assist cultivation would be even more effective. The intermediate method could make far better use of the blood. He decided to try the high-level beast blood first. He took a sip. The effect was immediate and violent. Energy erupted through him like an explosion. It felt as if his flesh and bones were being torn apart. He had clearly underestimated the power contained in high-level ferocious beast blood. His body nearly couldn't handle the sudden surge, but Ye Tian forced himself into the process. He called on the intermediate elemental force forging body-body method again and again, channeling and refining the incoming energy, enduring the pain as the two forces fought for balance. Gradually, the savage energy subsided and was absorbed, and at last the high-level beast blood strength fused into him. Ye Tian breathed easier. If it hadn't been for the intermediate elemental force body refining method, he never would have been able to absorb the energy in a high-level, fierce beast's blood. Yueling must have known that, which was why she'd given him the manual together with the blood. He ran the numbers in his head. Right now, the high-level fierce beast blood alone would speed his cultivation by about 6 times. Factoring in the intermediate elemental force body refining method, that advantage jumped to 18-fold. On top of that, his inborn talent was a high-tier cultivation aptitude, at least 3 times better than the ordinary intermediate aptitude. Do the math, and compared with the average intermediate talent geniuses at the Linhai base, his cultivation speed would be roughly 54 times faster. Ye Tian stared in disbelief. Even if those intermediate talent geniuses managed to get their own assisted cultivation with intermediate-level fierce beast blood, which might boost them 2 or 3 times, he would still be cultivating at around 20 times the speed of other intermediate talents. He felt a rush of exhilaration at what that kind of advantage could mean. Ye Tian's progress was staggering. 1 month of his training advanced him almost as far as 2 years would for an ordinary mid-level cultivator. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. A pity there are only 10 bottles of high-grade fierce beast blood, he thought, eyes lingering on the small stash. With ample resources and no interruptions, Ye Tian threw himself into cultivation with everything he had. Time blurred. 3 months later, he finally broke through. At last, elite warrior level, he breathed. His skin, muscles, and bones had been tempered to razor-sharp resilience, and his strength shattered the 10,000-pound mark, the threshold that signaled the first step into the elite ranks. It wasn't the pinnacle of the elite realm yet, but it was a decisive advancement. In the early stage of becoming an elite warrior, the next crucial task was to temper his blood. The path of an elite is one of blood refinement. Only by forging the blood to sufficient potency can the flesh be replenished and reinforced, allowing the body to evolve toward higher forms. Cultivation, Ye Tian reminded himself, was an evolutionary process. Ye Tian still hadn't begun the actual blood refinement. The process of quenching one's blood was tedious and perilous. You had to purge impurities again and again, refine the remaining blood until it was pure. It devoured massive amounts of blood and nutrients. If your intake couldn't keep up, your blood and cultivation would be drained instead, and you could die in the attempt. The only reliable way to replenish one's blood was with beast blood, to nourish blood with blood. That, however, required an enormous supply. High-grade beast blood worked far better, but Ye Tian neither had access to high-level beast blood nor to anywhere near enough of the lower-grade stuff. The situation at the coastal base made it worse. There were few fighters overall, but beast blood was desperately scarce because the elites consumed more than 90% of the stock. The amount they used every day was enough to leave ordinary martial artists speechless. Over the next 3 months, he didn't waste a single opportunity to copy talents. Quietly, Ye Tian duplicated several mid-level cultivation talents and fused them into his identity. He still couldn't force a metamorphosis of his higher-tier talent, but he could sense that it was sitting at the very peak. Maybe, he thought, if he managed to fuse a genuine high-tier talent, his gift could finally evolve into a top-tier one. 3 days later, he finished refining his blood and broke into the early elite warrior stage. He could now exert the equivalent of 13,000 pounds of force. With that increase in strength and the hope of the lighthouse jellyfish's talent calling to him, he prepared to return to the Lake of Death. Approaching the lake this time, Ye Tian felt a ripple of nerves. He was far stronger than he had been 3 months before. His sword power had ascended into the minor completion realm, and his shadow killing technique had reached the peak of great completion. Even so, he would not underestimate the danger here. The Lake of Death was home to top-level ferocious beasts, and once one of them was provoked, the result was certain death. Late afternoon faded without Ye Tian entering the Lake of Death. He waited until nightfall. The darkness beneath the lake would let him use his shadow talent. It couldn't fool high-level beasts that sensed spiritual power, but it could hide him from low and mid-level creatures. Moving under cover of night would be far safer than going in during daylight. When night came, the Lake of Death turned eerily still. The area throbbed with a ferocious bestial aura. Any ordinary person would have turned back long before reaching the shore. Ye Tian forced down the unease and slipped into the water. Shadow talent. He dissolved into shadow and flowed beneath the surface, swimming slowly and deliberately. As an elite warrior, he could hold his breath for an hour, but he still had to find the lighthouse jellyfish within that time. Otherwise, he'd have to surface, which would be risky. The water down here was pitch black. Without his replication talent, he never would have located the jellyfish. Relying on that edge, Ye Tian pressed on through the dark. Soon, through the replication talent, the first aquatic beast was detected, a tiger clawfish. Bloodline talent medium. Chapter 25. The tiger clawfish was a mid-level ferocious beast, not weak, but nothing Ye Tian worried about. He skirted it and continued his search for the lighthouse jellyfish. With his replica talent, no aquatic creature could hide from him. Since reaching elite martial artist, the talent's detection radius had expanded from 3 meters to 10. Within 10 meters, he could sense the talents of any living thing. Time passed slowly as he moved through the water. Ye Tian picked up the signatures of many aquatic beasts. The most dangerous moment came when he almost crossed paths with a high-level ferocious beast. Fortunately, it remained just out of range for probing and didn't use spiritual power to scan. Ye Tian slipped away in time. About half an hour later, he finally found them, a small group of lighthouse jellyfish. Species: lighthouse jellyfish. Bloodlined. Primary healing talent. A top-tier healing talent? Ye Tian was stunned. He had expected the lighthouse jellyfish to possess only a medium or high talent. Never did he imagine their healing talent would be among the very best. He had never encountered a top-tier talent before, and certainly hadn't expected to find one in a lighthouse jellyfish. Got it. Copy it to my hand. Ye Tian breathed, excitement rising. A single lighthouse jellyfish was weak and unlikely to notice him, so he crept closer. When his right hand brushed the creature, the jellyfish's supreme healing talent imprinted into him. Immediately, he pulled his hand back and retreated. One jellyfish wasn't the problem. A swarm was deadly. This place was the Lake of Death. He couldn't risk drawing a crowd. Even with the shadow talent, being trapped in that lake would be fatal. Before long, he was out of the water. Standing on the shore, he finally allowed himself a long, shuddering breath. I have to get out of here right away. Ye Tian wasted no time. He hurried away from the Lake of Death and ran toward the little cave where he had been staying. As soon as he stepped into the cave, Ye Tian began to fuse the pinnacle healing talent. The earth seemed to tremble as an unimaginable transformation took hold. If one could peer inside his body, they would have seen his cells undergoing radical changes, each cell reshaping itself as if entering a new stage of evolution. The pain was unlike anything he had ever felt. Fierce, overwhelming, all-consuming. Yet beneath the agony there was a thrill. He felt both tormented and elated. Time blurred. When the pain finally eased, Ye Tian pushed himself to his feet and checked his status at a glance. Name: Ye Tian. Race: human. Cultivation talent: advanced. Speed talent: elementary. Knife talent: medium. Shadow talent: primary. Healing talent: top. Let's test this top-tier healing, he muttered. He drew a small blade and cut his forearm. In less than a second, the wound sealed as if it had never been there. Ye Tian inhaled sharply. The healing talent was astonishing. With a healing grade like this, short of a fatal strike, he would be nearly impossible to kill. His ability to survive injury had just jumped several levels. Ye Tian didn't fool himself into thinking he was invincible. His healing ability still consumed energy, and if his reserves ran dry, the power would fail. If he ran into an opponent he couldn't handle, the most his healing could do was buy him time. Eventually, without greater strength, he'd die. Strength mattered above all. After a night of rest in the cave, he set out at dawn and hurried back to the coastal base. Over the next 2 weeks, he resumed hunting ferocious beasts and bought himself a small truck, a brand new Yuan Li pickup, for 1 million yuan. With the truck, he could haul back many more carcasses each day, so his income rose significantly. Combined with his healing talent, it became nearly impossible for intermediate-level beasts to kill him, and high-level beasts were rare enough that they posed little immediate threat. In just half a month, he repaid his loan, stashed 5 million yuan, and accumulated a large supply of mid-level beast blood. With those resources in hand, Ye Tian was ready to spend some time cultivating and increasing his strength. For elite martial artists, cultivation is as much about tempering the blood as it is about refining the body. The two must be balanced, and the Yuanli forging body method naturally refines the flesh while it tempers the blood, the two processes complementing each other. Surpassing 10,000 jin marks the entry into the elite ranks, and the ceiling for an elite is 100,000 jin. Ye Tian's current strength was under 20,000 jin, far from the peak of the elite tier. Still, his multiple talents made him unusually adaptable. They allowed him to contend with elite opponents of over 50,000 jin and even survive against those at the elite peak. That said, it wasn't enough. Ye Tian wanted to measure himself against the peak elites, and someday, even against the great martial artists. The problem was that his talents were all auxiliary. There wasn't a single direct offensive talent among them. Next time, he vowed, he would make a different choice. Next time, I'll be sure to copy an offensive talent, he decided. As a warrior stationed at the coastal base, Ye Tian kept his expectations low. His quarry was not a human genius, but a fierce beast, and a talented one at that. Beasts with innate abilities could far outstrip ordinary warriors. The good news was that once you identified a beast with a talent, tracking it down was far easier than trying to pick out a prodigy from among humans. Finding a gifted beast was not the same as finding a needle in a haystack. Still, beasts with offensive talents were particularly fearsome, and copying those talents required enormous strength. So Ye Tian spent the next half-month pushing his cultivation harder than ever. Thanks to his supreme healing talent, he could shrug off the physical damage that came with transitional cultivation, and his progress shot upward. By repeatedly exhausting the blood of countless intermediate fierce beasts to fuel his growth, he raised his strength to the level of 30,000 jin, a milestone many high-grade prodigies would struggle to reach in months. On the day his power hit that mark, Ye Tian sat down with a newly purchased, relatively complete set of bestiaries and began searching for a suitable fierce beast to target. Hercules Bear, a mid-tier ferocious beast, roughly twice as strong as the average one, suspected strength aptitude, the list read. Ye Tian glanced once and shook his head. The Hercules Bear might well have a strength aptitude, but it wouldn't be very high, at best a second-grade strength talent, not worth his focus. Flamebird, mid-tier ferocious beast, has fire aptitude and can easily scorch ordinary mid-level beasts, the next entry reported. Ye Tian read that and shook his head again. The Flamebird's fire aptitude was only of the grade level. It would boost its power somewhat, but not nearly enough to contend with a peak elite martial artist. Then his gaze stopped on another entry. He looked longer this time. Surprise creased his features. This one is good, he thought. Chapter 26. Divine Power Ants. Ye Tian studied the entry on the Divine Power Ants with care. On paper, they were only a low-tier ferocious beast, but the description made their danger plain. Individually, they could rival a mid-level beast in strength, and they never appeared alone. They came in swarms, thousands at a time, and even a great warrior would be overwhelmed and besieged to death if caught by them. The Divine Power Ant must have a very strong power talent, Ye Tian thought. In his previous life, he'd known how formidable ants could be when organized. These were ferocious beasts with an innate ability that amplified their threat. If he could copy that talent, he would immediately bolster his own combat effectiveness. Still, Ye Tian felt the chill of caution. A single ferocious beast organized into a swarm was terrifying. A whole swarm with a special talent was something else entirely. Only the ants' bloodline limitations kept them from becoming an unending nightmare for humanity. If those limits weren't in place, the divine power ants would have long since become mankind's worst scourge. There aren't any divine power ants near Linhai Base, Ye Tian muttered, frowning. If there were, the base would have been destroyed long ago. To get close enough to study their abilities, you'd have to go much farther out, and that would be far too dangerous. Then an idea struck him. He didn't have to hunt down living divine power ants. If he could get hold of a complete divine power ant corpse, he could extract the ant's power aptitude from the body. There was a black market stall in the trade quarter, the Woogie shop, where everything changed hands. Fierce beast meat was common there. Whole carcasses were sold too, but intact bodies were rare, especially for beasts that were difficult to kill, like the divine power ant. Ye Tian had come here largely by chance. He didn't know where any divine power ants could be found, and the chances of dying if he went searching by himself were unacceptably high. So he had chosen the safer, if uncertain, route of hunting the market instead. The same woman clerk who had greeted him before approached once more, smiling and very welcoming. "Lord Samurai, what are you looking for today?" she asked. "I'm looking to buy an intact corpse of a divine force ant. Does the Martial Pavilion have any?" Ye Tian asked. "Divine force ant?" The young woman behind the counter looked taken aback. Things like that almost never came up for sale. When a warrior ran into a divine force ant, escape was rare. Who would hunt them, much less bring corpses to market? "Sir, I'll go and ask." She hurried away. A few minutes later she returned, apologetic. "I'm sorry, sir. There are no divine force ants here in Wuge." Disappointment flickered across Ye Tian's face, but it was expected. He recovered quickly. "If you don't have any, do you have any leads? Or could you help me procure a corpse? I'm willing to pay well." At that moment, a man in the Martial Pavilion's robes approached. "Guest, I am Chen He, Dean of Wuge. You want to buy a divine force ant corpse?" he asked. "Yes," Ye Tian nodded. Chen He smiled faintly. "I do have information about the divine force ants. I don't know if you'd be interested." "Oh, if it means getting a whole specimen of a divine force ant, I'm very interested," Ye Tian said eagerly. "There's talk that Linhai Base is planning to open a trade route with a medium-sized base about 100 kilometers away," Chen He explained. "The stretch between them just happens to contain a divine ant nest. Both bases are preparing to send teams to clear the beasts along that 100-kilometer corridor. The medium base will provide the main fighting force. It's dangerous, but the rewards will be substantial, and if you join the operation, getting a complete divine force ant body should be fairly straightforward." Ye Tian's face went pale. He knew better than most how the world worked now. The land belonged to the ferocious beasts. Humans eked out survival in scattered enclaves. For a small L base and a medium base to attempt to clear 100 kilometers of territory between them was brazen in the extreme. Aren't they worried about unleashing a terrible beast? Won't they take heavy losses when it happens? Ye Tian frowned. The thought had occurred to him already, and he knew the leaders at the two bases would have considered it as well. The only explanation he could come up with was that the area must be unusually remote. They assumed there were no truly powerful beasts nearby, and that gave them the nerve to act. But Ye Tian's mind went back to the Lake of Death. He knew there were top-tier ferocious beasts there, maybe more than one. If the two bases intended to clear the Lake of Death, it would be a bloody operation. Still, he didn't hesitate. "I want to take part in the cleanup." His reasoning was simple. Whether the two bases succeeded or failed wouldn't derail his plans. By joining the operation, he'd learn the location of the divine power ant swarm. In the chaos, he might even be able to probe their strength and copy the ant's talent, a golden opportunity he couldn't pass up. Chen He handed him a token. "Come to the Lin family in 3 days," he said. "Assignments will be made according to each person's strength." With that, he left. It looks like Wu Gei is involved in this plan too, otherwise the deacon wouldn't be taking such care. Ye Tian's expression darkened. He understood how dangerous the mission would be. The main force would come from the mid-sized base, while the coastal base was far too weak to hold them alone. This operation would likely cost many martial artists their lives, but he wasn't worried about himself. His methods of self-preservation were nearly on par with those of a great martial artist. And once he gained the divine power ant talent, he might even become strong enough to stand up to a grand martial force. 3 days passed. On the third day, Ye Tian rode out to the area controlled by the Lin family. The Lins were the dominant power in the coastal base. The Mo family, by contrast, was significantly weaker. Before he became a martial artist, Ye Tian had assumed the Lin family only boasted a single great martial artist. Now, however, he had come to understand the true depth of the Lin family's heritage. There were 5 great martial artists in total. One of them stood at the very peak. His strength measured at 900,000 jin, more than enough to kill an ordinary great martial artist in an instant. With such a powerhouse taking up residence with the Lin family, the other clans had no thought of rebellion. When Ye Tian reached the appointed spot, many martial artists were already gathered, at least 100. Numerous elites were among them, but not a single great martial artist could be seen. Ye Tian scanned the crowd and, surprised, said, "Oh, there are a few familiar faces." Chapter 27. Among the faces in the crowd, the only ones Ye Tian recognized were a handful of warriors from the Wind Wolf hunting squad, the same unit that had taken down the Silver Moon Marten and from which he'd gained his primary speed talent. He'd also grown close to them in the past and felt a sort of obligation in return. That speed talent had been crucial in his early days. Without it, he probably would have died at Shadow Li Kun's hands. If I can help the Wind Wolf hunting squad on this mission, I will, he told himself. Ye Tian could identify the Wind Wolf members, but they didn't recognize him. He'd changed too much. Months of cultivation and constant killing had altered his temperament. A cold, lethal aura clung to him now, and his face had hardened into something older. Though he was only 16, he looked closer to 18 or 19, markedly more mature than the boy he'd once been. Back then, he had only been about 1.70 meters tall. Now he stood a full 1.80, broader and more solidly built. When Wind Wolf had last seen Ye Tian, he was just a boy, a low-ranking martial artist. Hardly memorable. Wind Wolf and the others had long since forgotten him. Ye Tian didn't glare at them or call attention to himself. He stayed in a quiet corner, waiting for the person in charge to arrive. A few of the younger fighters drifted over, curious. A teen who had already become a martial artist suggested exceptional talent, and talent was always worth courting. If they knew Ye Tian had already reached the elite ranks, they would have been stunned. That kind of awareness, however, was rare at the level of the great martial artists. One could only truly gauge another's cultivation in battle or by sensing their aura. Ye Tian had always kept his breath, his internal aura, tightly controlled, concealing his true strength. Even the strongest of the elite would have had no way of reading him. Ye Tian wasn't refusing to show the power of an elite martial artist. It was just not the right time. He could afford to bide his time. After he had copied the Divine Power Ant's power talent, he could reveal his strength without worry. For the sake of politeness to these other fighters, Ye Tian kept his behavior casual and perfunctory. "Lin Mingji is coming!" The crowd erupted. At the name, memories and rumors flooded Ye Tian's mind. Lin Mingji was the son of the current head of the Lin family. Only in his 30s, he had already reached the peak of the elite martial artist rank, hovering close to the great martial artist realm. Lin Mingji's talent was middling, good enough to qualify him for promotion to a great martial artist, but not exceptional. In all likelihood, he would only ever reach the early stage of that realm. Even so, an early-stage great martial artist was more than enough to dominate Linhai base. Apart from the Lin family's one true peak great martial artist, the rest of their great martial artists only stood at the initial level. Ye Tian guessed that the Lin family's top fighter must be a high-level cultivator, but he hadn't been able to break through to the Sectmaster realm. He was already very old. It seemed unlikely he would ever make the breakthrough in his lifetime. "Quiet, everyone!" A broad-shouldered man with thick brows and large eyes called out nearby. It was Lin Mingji. He waited until the crowd fell silent, then spoke. "Anyone here has come willingly to take part in the beast clearance operation. This mission could bring unimaginable benefits to our coastal outpost. Our outpost is small and short on resources. If we can open a trade route and strike a deal with a mid-sized base, we'll be able to buy treasures and supplies we simply can't get here. That's why this operation is so important. Of course it's dangerous, but the rewards will more than justify the risk. I promise you, anything you obtain on this trip is yours to keep. If you can't carry a beast's spoils away on the spot, the Lin family will compensate you later with half of those goods. Of course, those are just the baseline rewards, Lin Mingji announced. Each warrior will receive 20 vials of mid-grade fierce beast blood and 2 million yuan. Elite fighters will get 3 vials of high-grade beast blood and 10 million yuan. His words sent the assembled warriors into an uproar. In addition to any personal spoils they might claim, there were these extra bonuses. Who wouldn't be thrilled? As for the carcasses of beasts that couldn't be carried away on the spot, the Lin family promised to haul them back and divide the value. The fighters would receive half. That satisfied everyone. Some of those beasts were enormous and often left to rot. The Lin family offering to retrieve them and split the proceeds seemed unusually considerate. Ye Tian watched the excited faces around him and shook his head inwardly. They were being far too optimistic. The rewards were tempting, but they only applied to the survivors. If someone died out there, they'd get nothing, and the Lin family would lose nothing at all. Recruiting a group of free agents could be surprisingly profitable, and the Lin family had no shortage of resources to make it happen. With their money and influence, they'd drawn a crowd. Nearly 200 fighters had gathered already, and with warriors from the major families joining in, Ye Tian estimated that at least 1,000 men would be involved in the operation. That was a significant mobilization. The entire coastal garrison only numbered a few thousand warriors, so calling up almost 1,000 for this plan took a large chunk of their available strength. To sort everyone by ability, Lin Mingji had one of his men bring out a measuring pillar, a yuan energy instrument that registers the force of a strike. A punch against the pillar makes the readings spike, an old but reliable way to assess a fighter's raw power. A well-known warrior went up first to test himself, and the organizers grouped people according to cultivation levels as the results came in. Ye Tian kept his head down. He deliberately concealed any display of his highest capabilities, only showing enough to register at the late martial artist level. Even so, his performance caused a stir. People began whispering and murmuring praise at his strength and potential. Lin Mingji, impressed, even tried to persuade Ye Tian to come serve at the Lin family capital, an attractive offer, but Ye Tian declined. Lin Mingji didn't pay it much mind. He assumed Ye Tian was only a mid-level talent, and mid-level talent wasn't something the Lin family prized. When the martial power tests finished, the students were split into teams, elite warrior squads and regular warrior squads. Each type of team had different assignments. The regular squads would clear out low-level beasts, while the elite squads were sent after intermediate ones. Ye Tian crossed over to the Windwolf hunting squad and addressed their captain. The squad was supposed to have 8 members, but 2 were absent, leaving only 6 standing there. "Little brother, you really want to join us?" Captain Windwolf said, hesitating. "We've only got 1 true martial artist in the squad. You're talented. You'd be better off with one of the stronger teams made entirely of martial artists." Ye Tian smiled faintly. "Captain Windwolf has a good reputation and seems like a decent man, so I'd like to join your team. But if you don't want me, I won't force it." "Then welcome to our pack, little brother," the Windwolf said, extending his right hand with a warm smile. Chapter 28. When Ye Tian fell in with Windwolf's crew, another fighter joined them, and the group swelled to 10. After about half an hour, the teams were formed. Windwolf was chosen as leader. Ye Tian didn't object. "Our mission is to clear out the beasts in this sector." Windwolf spread the map they'd been handed and tapped a point. Ye Tian peered at it. The target lay roughly 30 kilometers from the coastal base. "A bit far, Captain," someone complained. "We've never been deployed that far out." "No choice," Windwolf said. "This operation covers 100 kilometers, and I signed on knowing that. I'm prepared to take part in the sweep." The others exchanged helpless looks and nodded. They sketched out a brief battle plan and packed up. Out here, the situation shifted too fast for elaborate schemes. Plans rarely survived contact with the field, so they kept the briefing short and moved out toward their destination. This mission took them far from home. Even though the car was sturdy and could carry a lot of supplies, the others decided against driving. The tracks ahead were rough and unpredictable. The vehicle would be too clumsy on uneven terrain. It was smarter to travel light and go on foot. On the walk, Ye Tian kept his own plan to himself. First, finish the assigned task with Windwolf, then head to the place where the Divine Force ant had been seen and try to fish in troubled waters. Later, while talking with Windwolf, Ye Tian learned the man's real name, Zhang Feng. Windwolf wasn't his given name at all, but a title from the hunting squad that had stuck. Zhang's talent for cultivation, Ye Tian discovered, was limited, only a basic aptitude. Reaching the late stage of the martial artist rank was already a significant achievement for him. At best, Zhang might be able to push into the elite martial level in his lifetime, but becoming an elite martial artist outright would be extremely difficult. Ye Tian didn't think becoming an elite martial artist was impossible. His talent was exceptionally high, a true high-grade cultivation gift. The Windwolf, however, only possessed a primary cultivation talent. The gap between a martial artist and an elite martial artist was like a heavenly barrier to him. It wasn't completely unbreakable, but the odds were under 30% and it would demand vast resources. That was precisely why the Windwolf had taken this mission. He hoped it would yield great results and perhaps smash that bottleneck. He'd been forged in countless battles, and though the assignment was dangerous, it represented a rare chance. A veteran fighter like him couldn't simply walk away. "Little brother Ye Tian," the Windwolf asked, curious, "you're not even 20 and already in the late stage of martial artist. Your talent is extraordinary. Why insist on taking such a dangerous mission?" Ye Tian answered with two simple words: to grind. The Windwolf couldn't help but admire him. "You should know that the prodigies from the Linhai base rarely venture into the wilds alone. When they do go out, they travel under the protection of several elite fighters." By contrast, Ye Tian was a different breed, a genuine martial artist who didn't need an escort. Windwolf thought to himself that if he were only of average talent, he wouldn't dare to strike out into the wilds by himself. He'd attach to a major force and cultivate in relative safety. The 30-kilometer journey was long, and no one wanted to hurry through dangerous territory, so it took most of the day to reach their destination. "Everyone," Windwolf warned. "We may be the ones who clear beasts from this area, but if we run into any mid-level creatures, get backup immediately." Calling for support was every team's right. Each squad leader carried a Yuanli communicator, but its range was limited, only about 10 kilometers, so they had to stay mindful of their positions when venturing deeper into the wilds. The crowd nodded along with Windwolf. Everyone understood they couldn't handle mid-tier fierce beasts on their own. If they ran into one, they'd have no choice but to call for elite warriors. Ye Tian darkly shook his head. The contact device Windwolf was sending out was little more than a comfort, symbolic, not practical. With such a long column, and who knew how many fierce beasts ahead, there simply wouldn't be enough fighters to clear the way. They were bound to take heavy losses. Even if Windwolf managed to reach other elite squads, there probably wouldn't be anyone who could come to their aid. Most of them could quote the old rhetoric about comrades not being abandoned, but when it came down to their own lives, they couldn't help but cling to a sliver of hope. "There are 3 grass wolves up ahead, low-level beasts. Let's take them out." Windwolf pointed to the 3 targets about 300 meters away. The grass wolf was one of the weakest among the low-level fierce beasts. Even a newly promoted warrior could handle it. In a moment, the 3 grass wolves were cut down by the group. Windwolf and the others didn't bother salvaging the grass wolf. There was nothing valuable on its body. The whole carcass was worth only 100,000, and at the size of a calf, it would be a nightmare to haul. They left it and resumed tracking. They soon caught sight of more prey. "Hunt! Search! Move out!" they called. The early part of the sweep had gone smoothly. Encounters were few, and the beasts they met weren't very strong, and that eased everyone up a little. Ye Tian, however, stayed alert. The valley ahead is where we'll do most of our clearing, he warned. Be careful, there could be powerful beasts inside. Woods, valleys, and rivers were always the most dangerous places in the wild. Flat, open ground was the safest. No sooner had the group entered the valley than a beast charged out, a 3-meter lizard, all red skin and bristling with spines along its back, its eyes full of malice. What kind of beast is this? Someone frowned. None of them had seen a creature like this before. Not even the wind wolf, who had encountered countless beasts, could name it. There were simply too many species, and their knowledge was limited to the animals that wandered around the seaside base. The vicious beasts out here never showed up near the base, so it was no surprise they were unfamiliar with it. A report hovered in the air like a label: species, fire-breathing lizard, bloodline talent, primary, flame talent, inferior. When Ye Tian read the talents, his face went serious. Everyone, be careful. It's a fire-breathing lizard with a flame talent, he warned hurriedly. What? It has the fire gift? The others went pale. Chapter 29 Flame Talent was a rare ability, an offensive talent that directly increased a creature's combat effectiveness. What hunters like Windwolf feared most while tracking beasts in the wild was running into a creature with a special talent. Such beasts might only be slightly more valuable as prey, but they were far more dangerous. Judging by its breath, it's still a low-grade beast. That's good, Windwolf told himself, trying to soothe his racing heart. The rest of the party stepped back, faces taut with tension. Windwolf looked at Ye Tian. You know this kind of beast. What level is its flame talent? Second class flame talent. Ye Tian answered without hesitation. Second class, Windwolf said, eyes narrowing. That flame will double its attack power. The beast isn't as clever as a trained warrior. Its attacks are straightforward and predictable. We can take it, but warriors, fall back to your starting positions. Don't get in the way. Obediently, the weaker warriors retreated a good distance. As Windwolf had feared, their strength would only complicate the fight. They could neither help nor hold the line. Swish! The Windwolf moved forward first, testing the waters. The fire-breathing lizard lunged, but instead of spewing flame, it snapped its jaws and bit down hard. With a thunderous clash, the Windwolf's blade met the lizard's teeth, sending the creature sprawling. One tooth shattered and flew out. Ye Tian watched from the side, calculating. The lizard had roughly 9,000 units of raw strength. Its flame attack was about 18,000. A warrior's natural limit sat around 10,000, and with Yuan force, a fighter's output could reach 20,000. The Windwolf's strike was probably under that cap, but it should be more than enough to handle this opponent. Confident, Ye Tian held back his full power. The injured lizard reared up and let out a furious roar, finally activating its flame talent. A massive fireball condensed in front of it and hurtled toward the Windwolf at terrifying speed. Chop! Windwolf's strike synced with Yuan Li's knife, the two movements fusing into a single blade of sword qi that cleaved through the fireball. The blade qi tore the flame apart and kept cutting toward the fire-breathing lizard. With a heavy strike, it scored another wound on the beast. Ye Tian and the other warriors surged forward at the same moment, pressing the attack. In short order, under everyone's combined effort, the fire-breathing lizard collapsed and died. Ha! So much for a special beast, one of the warriors crowed, breathless with excitement as he surveyed the fallen creature. Don't get careless, Ye Tian warned immediately. There could be more than one of them in this valley. Windwolf heard Ye Tian's words. His expression went sober. The thrill of the hunt drained away, replaced by a grave seriousness. Ye Tian was right. We just entered the valley and ran into a fire-breathing lizard. There must be more of them in here. Windwolf spat the words with obvious bitterness. The damned Lin family had assigned them this sector without so much as a proper reconnaissance, and then divided the hunting grounds by beast type as if everything would go according to plan. He wanted to complain, but he knew it would be useless. The Lin clan would not care about their complaints. Now that they were here, turning back was out of the question. Everyone, keep your eyes open, Windwolf barked. They moved out again. Before long, they met another fire-breather, and after a hard fight, managed to kill it. Not long after, two more launched themselves at the group. The ensuing battle was brutal. Windwolf and the others took several minor wounds, but ultimately prevailed. By then, they were standing on the valley's outer rim. Windwolf, breathing heavily, looked over the landscape and said, "It's obvious this valley is a lair. There must be dozens of them inside. If we press on now, we'll lose a lot of people." They had fought again and again until their yuan power was nearly spent and their bodies were exhausted. Their combat effectiveness had plummeted. In this state, no one could hope to take down a single fire-breathing lizard alone. Pressing on now would be suicide. "Fall back for now," Windwolf ordered. "Heal up, regroup, then we'll figure this out." No one protested. They were too afraid to argue. The squad withdrew from the valley, but just as they reached the entrance, they froze. A dozen fire-breathing lizards were blocking the way out. Windwolf's stomach dropped. With their current strength, even one of those things was dangerous. Against 10 or a dozen, they would be wiped out. "Help!" he shouted, fumbling for the distress beacon. He fired off a series of emergency signals as they fell back, but there was no reply. "They must have an elite squad within 10 kilometers, Windwolf snarled in frustration. "Why isn't anyone answering?" "There's no point calling for help. No one's coming," Ye Tian said. "I know that," Captain Windwolf replied with a bitter twist to his voice, "but I'd hoped, foolishly, that people might surprise me." He sighed, helpless. 10 fire-breathing lizards charged forward. In raw speed, they were only on par with a mid-level warrior. Windwolf himself was in the late stage, and if he ran now, he had a good chance of getting away. But if he fled, the others would have no hope. Those others weren't faceless soldiers to him. They were men who had stood by him for more than 10 years. He couldn't bring himself to abandon them. For a heartbeat, he pictured Xiaoyue arriving. With her archery skill, they might slow the lizards down and buy enough time to survive. Then he dismissed the thought. Xiaoyu of the Windwolf hunting squad was still very young. He was only a low-rank warrior, but his archery was exceptional. As the son of a powerful family, his future looked bright. That same family would never allow him to take on such a dangerous mission. In fact, they had refused to let him join the squad and were probably keeping him under guard at home. Now, the fire-breathing lizards were closing in. The Windwolf captain, who had been momentarily stunned, snapped back to his senses and made a decision. "I'll hold these lizards off. You all get out of here." His resolve spread through the group like wildfire. "Captain, we'll fight with you," one warrior called, stepping forward. Others followed, their fear replaced by determination. Only the newest man, who hadn't truly been part of the Windwolf squad, wavered. He showed no faith in a fight to the death. He was already preparing to run. "Everyone, deal with those fire-breathing lizards. I'm not sticking around," someone shouted as he bolted deeper into the valley, clearly heading for cover. "Shameless," another voice called after him. The Windwolf ignored the fleeing warrior and turned to Ye Tian. "Brother Ye Tian, you're too talented to die here. You should get out while you can." Ye Tian smiled faintly. "Don't worry, we won't die. They're just a bunch of fire-breathing lizards." At that, a calm, powerful martial aura rolled off him, unmistakably that of an elite fighter. The others fell silent, glancing at him with a mix of relief and apprehension. Chapter 30. An Elite Warrior. The Windwolf stared at Ye Tian, stunned and incredulous. Becoming an elite warrior had been his lifelong goal, and he knew how impossible it usually was. With only basic cultivation talent, it was virtually out of reach. Even a genius with intermediate talent would need at least 20 years and abundant resources to rise to that level. Yet here was Ye Tian, still so young and already an elite. One thought flashed through the Windwolf's mind: advanced cultivation talent. That put Ye Tian on par with the Lin family's old ancestor, a future great martial artist, with a real chance of surpassing even that realm and reaching the peak of the great martial artists. If he did, he could become the strongest figure at the coastal base. It was an honor to have someone of such promise in their squad. Before the Windwolf could fully process it, Ye Tian moved. So fast that the wolf couldn't even catch him. In a flash of movement, Ye Tian's sword cut through the air, and all 10 fire-breathing lizards dropped before him. They were dead in an instant. "Lord Ye Tian," Windwolf cried, falling to one knee. The others followed suit, bowing quickly and respectfully. The gap between a regular warrior and an elite martial artist was not just one of raw strength but of reflexes, speed, and the sheer volume of yuan force they could wield. An elite cultivator with a measured physical strength of 10,001 kilograms was far superior to an advanced fighter rated at 9,999 kilograms. The two simply weren't comparable. Until now, they had assumed Ye Tian was only a warrior and had treated him like a comrade, calling him brother. Now that they knew he was an elite martial artist, they instinctively became more formal and careful, no longer daring to use familiar terms. Ye Tian waved a hand. Don't be so formal. Just call me Ye Tian. But please keep the fact that I'm an elite martial artist to yourselves for the time being. Then I'll call you by your first name, the Wind Wolf grinned. Don't worry, we won't tell anyone you're an elite warrior. Ye Tian understood why he had to keep his cultivation hidden. The great families at Linhai Base were jealous and predatory. If his talent became known, those clans would swarm to ingratiate themselves. Or, out of envy, they might even try to kill him. Even the slightest risk was unacceptable. Once Ye Tian grew stronger, those families would be nothing to him, but until then, he had to stay concealed. A sudden scream cut through the air. It's Zhang Ben. The Windwolf's brow tightened. Zhang Ben was the warrior who had just escaped, now apparently cornered by other fire lizards. He wanted to rush to help. They were comrades, after all. But Ye Tian put a hand on his arm. Windwolf, don't. Ye Tian said quietly. You don't have to save him. You can keep my secret, but he might not. The Windwolf glanced at the others, calculating, and then fell silent. The thought of exposing Ye Tian's true strength and inviting 1,000 problems made him drop the idea of a rescue. The screams soon died away, a sure sign that Zhang Ben was dead. Windwolf, keep moving. Let's clear out the feral beasts in this valley as quickly as we can, Ye Tian ordered. Windwolf nodded. Without Ye Tian, they wouldn't have dared to push deeper into the ravine. With him at the front, however, things were different. An elite warrior like Ye Tian could take on a pack of fire-breathing lizards without breaking a sweat. As they advanced, they came upon Zhang Ben's body. A few scorched lizards were tearing at the corpse. Ye Tian dispatched them with a casual sweep, and they moved on. For the rest of the way, any fire-breathers they encountered fell to Ye Tian alone. Only when a single, weaker lizard appeared did Ye Tian allow Windwolf and the others to practice, a quick lesson for them under his watch. He led the small group deeper into the valley until they climbed a boulder and peered down. Spread below were dozens of fire-breathing lizards, roughly 30 of them, and at their center loomed an even larger, older beast. Ye Tian's expression tightened. That's, he murmured, his voice low and serious. He was still some distance away, so he couldn't make out the giant fire-breathing lizard's exact attributes, but judging by its size, easily 3 meters larger than a normal fire-breathing lizard, there was no doubt it wasn't a low-grade predator. Ye Tian guessed aloud, that's a mid-level beast. Mid-level creatures didn't bother him in general, but those with offensive talents were the true tyrants among the ferocious beasts. He squinted toward the clearing and reported to Windwolf and the others. Something's wrong. There are 30 fire-breathing lizards there, and one of them looks like a mid-level. What? Windwolf's face went pale. A mid-level fire-breathing lizard was terrifyingly powerful, far beyond the reach of an ordinary elite warrior. He ground his teeth. They had come this far. He hated the idea of turning back. Still, he knew the danger when he saw it, and he didn't think Ye Tian could take on a mid-level beast alone. Ye Tian, let's get out of here. This is too much. We should abandon the task. No matter how talented Ye Tian was, he was still only an elite martial artist. How could he possibly face a mid-level fierce beast with the flame talent? Windwolf, don't count me out, Ye Tian said. That fire-breathing lizard does have the flame talent, but I've got a special talent too. Windwolf froze, eyes widening. The difference between a warrior with a special talent and one without was huge. Even high-rank fighters treated talented elites with caution. You have a special talent? He stammered. That's right. Ye Tian nodded. I have the elementary speed talent. It triples my speed, and my swordsmanship is solid. I can take down that mid-level beast. I'm going in for a beheading. Stay back and don't come near. He was confident he could kill the beast, but far less certain he could protect Windwolf and the others if they ignored him. If they didn't keep their distance, it would only make things worse. Ye Tian, we'll fall back and put some distance between us. Be careful. If you can't handle it, retreat, Windwolf called. I understand, Ye Tian replied, nodding. Once Windwolf and the others had withdrawn to a safe distance, Ye Tian sprang into action. Speed talent. He activated the ability and surged forward with a triple speed boost, closing on the fire-breathing lizard swarm in an instant. The roar of the lizards roused their sleeping leader. Its huge pupils snapped open and locked on Ye Tian with lethal intent. To that monstrous beast, Ye Tian was nothing more than a pesky little insect, one that needed to be crushed for disturbing its rest. Chapter 31. A thunderous roar split the air. The alpha of the fire drakes bellowed, and its clan surged forward toward Ye Tian. The leader had expected an easy victory. After all, Ye Tian was only one human. He didn't know that Ye Tian was an elite martial artist. The moment Ye Tian activated his speed talent, his movement became comparable to a peak elite fighter. More dangerous still was his swordsmanship. Shadow kill. Ye Tian's bronze-level sword technique blossomed into a blade of light that sliced clean through two drakes' necks in an instant. Poof! After that, a volley of sword rays swept outward, and one by one the fire drakes collapsed where they stood. These low-tier feral drakes couldn't even shred Ye Tian's clothing. At most, they drained a little of his internal energy each time they struck. If there had been hundreds of them, he might have been overwhelmed, but only 30 or so were no real threat to him. Watching his clan fall, the alpha grew frantic. It could no longer just bark orders from the rear. Seeing its underlings slaughtered, it lunged forward to strike personally. When the fire-breathing lizard leader finally rose and charged, Ye Tian could take in its full, terrifying form. It was 8 meters long, and the barbed spines along its back stood a full meter high, radiating a cold, dangerous aura. From the way it breathed and carried itself, Ye Tian could tell this was a mid-grade fierce beast. As it closed to within 10 meters, Ye Tian read its talents clearly. Species: fire-breathing lizard. Bloodline talent: medium. Flame talent: primary. Primary flame talent? Ye Tian muttered, surprised. A secondary flame talent only doubled a creature's attack. A primary talent tripled it. Fierce beasts are naturally stronger than warriors, and unless a warrior receives a corresponding increase in yuan strength, they stand no chance against a beast of the same rank. Fierce beasts could awaken their bloodline talents and get a temporary surge in power. When that happened, even a skilled warrior could be overwhelmed. The fire-breathing lizard leader before him was no exception. A mid-tier ferocious beast with a primary flame bloodline, its raw attack power already outclassing Ye Tian's. There was only one option, Ye Tian decided. It had to be killed and consumed. The lizard showed a measure of intelligence. As it charged, it tapped its flame talent and formed a massive fireball that streaked forward. The blast detonated with a thunderous boom, sending out rippling shock waves of heat and flame. Ye Tian took the hit without flinching. He didn't bother deploying his Yuan Force protective body. As an elite martial artist, he could have formed the barrier, but it wouldn't stop those flames, and he needed to conserve his Yuan Force. Instead, he met the assault head-on and lunged straight for the fire-breathing leader. Shadow kill! Ye Tian's shadow kill erupted from his peak dodging cultivation, the sword turning into a blinding streak of light that shot straight for the fire-breathing lizard's leader. The surge in speed from his peak dodging state, combined with the extra velocity granted by the bronze-rank sword technique, made the strike terrifyingly swift. An ordinary elite fighter would have been cut down instantly, but the lizard's defenses far outclassed a mere human opponent. It met Ye Tian's blade head-on. Boom! The lizard leader was shoved back several meters. A deep gash opened across its forehead and blood spurted out. 50,000 jin of physical power. Ye Tian measured instantly. The beast's raw strength registered at 50,000 jin, while its flame attack equaled roughly 150,000 jin. By contrast, Ye Tian's base strength was only 30,000 jin. With his Yuan Force boosting him, he could push about 60,000 jin. The bronze-level shadow kill added a huge offensive bonus, though. bringing his effective attack power up to roughly 110,000 to 120,000 jin, still short of the lizard's flame, but enough to carve a serious wound. Even so, Ye Tian's strikes were nowhere near as powerful as the firebray, athing lizards. The flames had seared his body, leaving him charred and pitiful. Without his top-tier healing talent, he would have died. In a blink, however, his burns closed and the wounds mended as if nothing had happened. The fire-breathing lizard leader, by contrast, couldn't recover. Its injuries festered, and its condition steadily worsened. Ye Tian's supreme healing let him keep pressing the attack, unhindered. Gradually, the leader's wounds deepened, while Ye Tian stood fully recovered. After 3 minutes, the lizard finally collapsed, its life force ebbing away. It died at Ye Tian's hands, a victory by the weaker fighter. In truth, even without that extraordinary healing gift, Ye Tian would still have had a fighting chance. Ye Tian could have used his primary speed talent to dodge the fire-breathing lizard leader's attacks and slip in close for strikes, or waited until nightfall and employed his shadow talent to ambush it for a killing blow. Instead, he charged straight in. A direct assault would finish the hunt more quickly, and he didn't want to waste time. He finished off the remaining fire-breathing lizards, then turned back to the leader's carcass. Blood from intermediate-grade fierce beasts was valuable, especially from a fire-breathing lizard, whose blood contained flame energy thanks to its fire talent. That kind of blood was particularly useful for refining the physique, so Ye Tian made sure not to let any of it go to waste. The leader had been large, so there was a lot of blood to collect. After he finished, Ye Tian had about 50 vials of intermediate fierce beast blood stored away. Those 50-odd vials of intermediate fierce beast blood alone were worth millions, a tidy profit. After slaying the fire-breathing lizard, Ye Tian waved the wind wolf and the others over. They stared at the scattered bodies and at the massive corpse of the lizard leader, dumbfounded. "Ye Tian, you actually killed a mid-level fierce beast?" the wind wolf blurted. He studied Ye Tian closely. Ye Tian's clothes were in tatters, but there wasn't a mark on him. The wind wolf inwardly concluded his companion must be hiding some trump card, though he wasn't the sort to pry, and he knew asking outright would be rude. The flesh and hide of a mid-level fierce beast were rare and valuable, so with Ye Tian's permission, the wind wolf and the others set to work, dividing the leader's carcass among themselves. By the next morning, Ye Tian, the wind wolf, and the others had nearly wiped out the ferocious beasts in the area, making sure nothing dangerous remained. Ye Tian then announced he wanted to move on. The wind wolf stared at him in disbelief. "Move on? Why?" he blurted. "What? Ye Tian, are you planning to go into the Divine Force Ants' territory?" Chapter 32. Wind Wolf knew how dangerous the Divine Power Ants were. He had learned that the last target of their mopping-up operation this time was a whole nest of them, an entire colony. Though classed as low-level ferocious beasts, Divine Power Ants were far stronger than the fire-spitting lizards. Even an ordinary elite warrior would struggle against one. If low-level beasts were ranked, Divine Power Ants would easily be in the top 10. A single ant wasn't the real threat, it was their numbers. They swarmed relentlessly, and even a great warrior could be overwhelmed. "Wind Wolf, I have a plan," Ye Tian said firmly. "I know how to stay alive. I'll be fine." Wind Wolf saw he couldn't change Ye Tian's mind and had no choice but to let him go. Ye Tian pulled out the map, glancing at it from time to time as he followed the route toward the Divine Power Ant nest. He avoided fighting any fierce beast he met. He was far from the Linhai base, a region where high-level creatures were relatively rare, but even so, Ye Tian had come across no fewer than 10 high-level beasts. He couldn't hope to defeat them, and sometimes not even the stronger mid-level ones. Running was his only option. So he stayed cautious and kept his distance. Occasionally, he saw other warriors out hunting, but he never intervened, even when they took heavy losses. They were strangers with no ties to him. Helping might win him no gratitude and could just bring trouble. Right now, his only concern was obtaining the Divine Force Ant talent, and nothing else mattered. Thanks to his shadow talent, he slipped past danger more than once, and finally reached the area where the Divine Force Ants were said to be. So many warriors. When Ye Tian arrived, he froze. At the foot of the hill, nearly 100 fighters were massed. and even the weakest among them radiated the power of elite martial artists. There were surely several great martial artists in their ranks. That could only mean one thing, the Mo family. His gaze fixed on one figure in particular. Mo-en. Ye Tian recognized him because he had once killed Mo-en's son, Mo Xiaobei. After that incident, he had done his homework on the Mo family, so he wouldn't walk into trouble unprepared. Mo-en's own strength sat in the middle tier of the elite. Nothing to worry about for Ye Tian now. But even so, Mo-en would be counted among the top 10 fighters of his clan. Mo-en and a number of the Mo family's elite stood respectfully behind an old man. Ye Tian's mind supplied the name, Mo Changqing, the great warrior of the Mo family. Ye Tian's expression darkened. He immediately dropped his gaze and refused to look directly at Mo Changqing, careful not to draw the old warrior's attention. Who? A cold voice snapped from the Mo ranks. Oh, spotted! Someone else called out in alarm. Ye Tian stood frozen for a moment, stunned. He kept his distance. He hadn't used his shadow talent, but he moved carefully, hugging the cover of the trees. He should have been hard to spot. Still, he knew he'd been found. It wasn't Mo Changqing who'd seen him, though. The man watching him now was an unfamiliar elder, dressed differently from the people at the coastal base and wearing armor. He looked like a veteran, one of the great warriors from a neighboring medium-sized base that cooperated with the coastal garrison to clear the fierce beasts. At a gesture from that veteran, several elite martial artists flashed forward and surrounded Ye Tian. He didn't run. If he fled now, what would that make him? Besides, he had no ill intent and nothing to hide. There was no reason to run. He stood and met them head-on. I'm a warrior of Linhai Base, he said plainly. The elites paused. They could see he was a bona fide martial artist, and when they heard Linhai Base, they relaxed and held their ground. The old man's brow knit into a frown. Which warrior from Linhai Base are you? He asked. I don't know. He isn't from the Lin family. He's not from our Mo family either. Not ours. One family after another shook their heads. Ye Tian stepped forward and answered frankly, I'm not a scion of any great clan. I came because I finished the beast-clearing assignment, and I'm curious about the divine power ants. At that, Lin Mingji from the Lin family suddenly said, Now I remember. He's one of the martial artists who joined the cleanup plan. I didn't expect him to finish so quickly and show up here. Lin Mingji recognized Ye Tian because he'd once tried to recruit him. Ye Tian had refused, which left an impression. He's talented, the elder went on. He's already reached the elite martial level at such a young age. Let him stay and help deal with the divine ants. The old man's tone left no doubt that he had just used his spirit sensing to inspect Ye Tian's condition. Ye Tian's face didn't change. He knew he couldn't hide his cultivation before a great martial artist anyway, so it was better to be straightforward. Lin Mingji's face went pale. He'd assumed the boy was just a regular fighter. He never dreamed he was an elite warrior. If he'd known that, he would have done whatever it took to recruit him into the Lin family. The other clans stared at Ye Tian in stunned silence. For someone so young to have reached the elite level, his talent was unmistakable. A top-tier cultivation prodigy. A few of the clan elders kept their expressions carefully neutral, but their minds were already calculating. Ye Tian felt the shift in the air. Cold, guarded currents of hostility from several of them, including Mo Jiamo and Changqing. He smiled faintly. He didn't want trouble with the families, but he understood their reaction. They were protective of their positions and naturally wary of anyone who might threaten their standing. That said, he had no intention of being pinned down to a mere seaside stronghold. Someday, he would leave the coastal base with his sister and step out into the wider world. The other families never understood. The warrior who had found Ye Tian made it clear he was in charge, and he allowed Ye Tian to remain, so none of the heads of the rival clans dared to challenge him. Ye Tian simply stepped aside and waited in silence. Then, suddenly, someone burst up from the earth and hurried over to the warrior. Elder Qing, the task is complete. Chapter 33. An Earth Attribute Talent? Ye Tian muttered, watching the warrior who had just risen from the soil. He was surprised. There wasn't a hole or even a crack in the ground where the man had appeared. It was as if he had simply come up through the earth itself, like some Earth escape technique out of a novel. On paper, that sort of ability could be useful, but Ye Tian knew its limits. It was dangerous. You could find yourself trapped underground, and it couldn't pass through metal, solid rock, or bodies of water. It wasn't very practical for most situations. He preferred talents that directly increased one's strength. "Everyone, fall back," Elder Qing ordered. The veteran warriors took a swift step away from the slope as if they could feel trouble coming. Ye Tian did the same and moved to a safer distance. "Now," Elder Qing barked. No sooner had the command left his lips than the ground began to tremble. A deep rumble rolled out like a magnitude 10 quake, and a terrifying wave of metaphor surged upward from beneath the earth. "This is bad. This is catastrophic." Ye Tian felt it in his bones. The shockwave that had just rippled through the ground was strong enough to obliterate him. No ordinary martial artist could have generated anything so massive. Then the impossible happened. The face of the hillside detonated as if struck by a thunderbolt. Rock and earth exploded outward like cannon fire. Fragments ricocheted into the ranks, but the warriors were sturdy. Many of the stones were blocked or shattered before they could do harm. In an instant, the hillside was gone, leaving a huge crater. Inside the torn earth lay countless corpses of divine ants, their bodies still smoldering with heat. The temperature in the area climbed more than 10 degrees in seconds. "It's like a missile from a past life," someone blurted out. Ye Tian's expression darkened. It wasn't really a missile. He could feel the fluctuation of metaforce in the blast. Whatever had struck them was a metaforce weapon, producing effects very much like an explosive strike. "What sort of power could do this?" an elite warrior demanded, voice trembling with horror. A senior warrior of the Lin family explained, "That effect was caused by a Yan burst ball. The Yan burst ball is basically the heart of a top-tier fiery beast. After a skilled array mage works on it, runes and formations are embedded on the heart. The burst comes from detonating the firepower contained in the heart, producing a massive explosive effect. A thing like that is priceless. Money can't measure it. Not even 1 billion could buy one." Ye Tian listened with interest, but his tone was resigned. "Those are out of my reach for now." He paused, thinking. If the blast wiped out their whole colony, we might at least find intact divine ant corpses. He did not say it out loud, but the idea darkened his expression. Elder Qing, however, was solemn and alert, his gaze fixed on the smoking crater. "Careful," he warned. "There are bound to be survivors." No sooner had he spoken than a chorus of chirps and the rustle of many legs rose from the rubble. One divine power ant crawled out of the hole, followed by others, some badly wounded, some oddly unscathed. The explosion had not finished them off after all. A blazing sphere hadn't destroyed the divine power ant lair, but it had still dealt heavy losses. "Fire!" came the command. The elite warriors from the major families each singled out a divine ant and engaged. The great warriors did not hang back either. They struck like catapults. Unlike the elite's more precise attacks, their blows were like rolling boulders. A single swing could carve tens of meters of scorched earth, and divine ants fell one after another as if they were nothing. Elder Qing was especially terrifying. Ye Tian's pupils tightened when he saw the old man press a hand out casually. A gigantic palm, tens of meters across, manifested in the air and smashed down, pulverizing dozens of divine ants and gouging a massive pit in the ground as if a giant had slammed his Han, D into the earth. With Elder Qing and so many great warriors here, Ye Tian thought surely they could clear the whole lair. Then he realized he had been wrong. The ground ripped open again, and more than a dozen enormous divine ants burst forth, each one roughly 10 meters long compared to the ordinary 3-meter specimens. "Intermediate ferocious beast-level divine power ants," Ye Tian blurted out in surprise. He had assumed divine power ants were all low-tier ferocious beasts. Even if an intermediate-level specimen existed, there should only be one, but now more than a dozen had appeared at once. Thanks to their unique talent, these intermediate-level divine power ants fought with the strength of great martial artists, even surpassing the average among them. No wonder the senior fighters were being pushed to their limits. Sometimes it took 2 great martial artists to suppress a single one of these ants. Elder Qing, however, remained eerily calm. He faced 5 of the intermediate ants alone, dispatched one with swift precision and showed no signs of strain. Meanwhile, Ye Tian was locked in combat with another divine power ant, matching it with the skill and power of a competent elite martial artist. He moved deliberately. The truth was, he had already scouted and analyzed the ant's talent in secret and was adjusting his tactics accordingly. Species: divine ant bloodline. Talent: primary strength. Talent: advanced. When Ye Tian saw the advanced strength talent, a smile spread across his face. The trip had not been in vain. From what he'd observed of the mid-tier fierce ant warriors, their talents hadn't undergone any transformation. They too should possess high-grade strength talents. That meant he didn't need to bother copying the intermediate fierce beast ant's abilities. He reached out and touched one of the lower-ranked fierce beast divine ants and copied its high-grade strength talent. The transfer completed the instant skin-met antenna, but it wasn't the right moment to merge the new talent into himself. He'd have to wait until things were safer before integrating it. The battle below was costly. Warriors were falling, and elite fighters died from time to time, but overall, the human forces held the advantage. If nothing unexpected happened, the soldiers would eventually wipe the divine ants from the field. Still, in the darkness, a chill of unease spread among Ye Tian and the other martial artists. Could there be even stronger divine ants they hadn't seen yet? Ye Tian wondered. It wasn't impossible. Ye Tian knew that every clan needed a leader, and the leader was usually the strongest. Those dozen mid-level fierce beasts showed only small differences in strength. None of them looked like the boss. He could only hope the leader wasn't a high-level divine power ant. If it was, they'd have no choice but to run. His group couldn't stand against a top-tier fierce beast. A few minutes passed in tense silence. Then suddenly, everyone's expressions changed. "Hurry up! This divine power ant lair has high-level fierce beasts," someone shouted. "Advanced beasts." The word sent a chill through everyone present. If it had been an ordinary high-level fierce beast, they wouldn't be worried. A single great martial artist could handle it. But a high-level fierce beast with divine power, like a divine power ant, was a different matter. It combined the raw strength of a top-tier beast with a rare offensive talent. Its attacks after enhancement could rival a master's. An ordinary great martial artist had no hope against one, and even someone as formidable as Qinglao would be outmatched. Only a heaven-level great martial artist or a sect master with equivalent offensive talent might stand a chance. "Nothing left but death," someone cried. Ye Tian snapped to attention. He didn't hesitate. Without another word, he activated triple acceleration and fled for the distance. Normally his speed was only average among elite martial artists, but with the triple boost he was on par with the fastest elites, perhaps even a little faster. In an instant, Ye Tian surged past many of the elite martial artists around him. A thunderous rumble split the air. A colossal divine power ant had appeared. It was some 20 meters long, its carapace a pale, shimmering gold instead of the ordinary black. The moment it materialized, an oppressive force rolled over the entire field. Something pressed down on Ye Tian, not gravity, but a suppression of momentum. Anyone caught in it found their movement lethally slowed. If you couldn't break that suppression, your speed would drop by several times and escape would be impossible. The elite fighters' speeds collapsed almost immediately, but the higher-level martial artists felt almost no effect. Only a slight 3 or 4% slowdown, leaving them far faster than the elites. "Blade momentum," Ye Tian shouted, and the aura of his sword posture flared. The sword force of the Dacheng realm pushed back against the ant's suppression. The oppressive weight vanished, and his speed snapped back to roughly 3 times his normal pace, now no slower than those higher-level martial artists. He exhaled sharply. A famous warrior broke free and fled. The high-level fierce beast divine power ants didn't single out Ye Tian. They attacked whoever was closest. That meant the other elite warriors paid the price. Elder Qing gave a quick warning to the rest, and was the first to turn and run. He had no intention of standing and fighting those divine power ants. Screams tore through the air. Elite warrior after elite warrior was cut down. They didn't even have a chance to mount a defense. The divine power ants swarmed and slaughtered them like insects. In a matter of heartbeats, more than a dozen seasoned fighters were dead. Ye Tian's only thought was to get away. He ran as fast as he could, not daring to look back. He didn't know how far he'd gone before he finally felt there were no footsteps or hissing mandibles behind him. When he dared to glance over his shoulder and saw no divine power ants in pursuit, relief washed over him. He found a random sheltered spot and collapsed to catch his breath, shaken but alive. He had been running flat out until his yuan energy was almost gone and his body felt threadbare. If he didn't recover soon, wandering the wilderness would be dangerous. Ye Tian downed a restorative elixir and let it work. After a few hours, his strength and energy were completely restored. He immediately made his way back to the valley where Windwolf and the others were camped. "Ye Tian, you're back!" Windwolf cried, relief flooding his voice. He and the others had been worried sick. Seeing Ye Tian return at last put them at ease. "Hurry back to the coastal base. Something big has happened," Windwolf said without wasting a breath. Ye Tian's expression darkened. "What happened?" Windwolf and the others exchanged worried looks. Ye Tian then told them about the divine power ants. As he described it, their faces went pale. Hordes of low-level divine power ants, more than a dozen mid-level ones, and even a near-invincible high-level divine ant. Such a force was terrifying. None of the Windwolf or the others had actually seen what happened, but from the edge in Ye Tian's voice, they all guessed enough. They had heard how many elite martial artists had fallen, and yet Ye Tian had returned unscathed. That alone earned their admiration. "Let's go. We've finished the mission," the Windwolf urged, anxious to leave. With that, they hurried back toward the coastal base, keeping their senses sharp the whole way. They didn't relax for a moment. The return trip proved dangerous. A string of mid-level beasts crossed their path. Each time, Ye Tian stepped forward and diffused the situation before it could turn deadly, his calm control pulling them through. By late afternoon, they finally reached the safety of the coastal base. As soon as they were inside, Ye Tian shut himself away to fuse the high-power talent. His abilities had already been revealed during the divine power ant incident. Not only his strength, but his speed talent had been noticed as well. Whether some influential family might take that as a threat or an opportunity was unclear, but he knew one thing: he had to grow stronger and fast. If he could fuse with a higher strength talent, his combat ability would easily rival that of a great martial artist. He could even crush an ordinary great martial artist. "Fusion!" he shouted, and a violent metamorphosis began. Ye Tian's muscles contorted and bulged, veins and sinews standing out as an almost green light pulsed under his skin. Power erupted from the depths of his genes, reshaping him from bone to muscle. He had no sense of how long it lasted. When it finally eased, his clothes were soaked through as if he'd just climbed out of water. Slowly, his strength returned. Only then did he check his talents. Human, Ye Tian Cultivation talent, Advanced Speed, talent Elementary Knife, talent Medium, Shadow talent, Primary Healing talent, Top Strength, talent Advanced. Seeing the high rating for strength made Ye Tian grin uncontrollably. "Let's test it." He grabbed a length of steel and, concentrating the strength talent, squeezed. The metal seemed to soften and fold under his grip, deforming as if it were putty. He stamped his foot once, and the ground split where he stood. Shockwaves ran through the surrounding earth, making everything nearby tremble violently. Without a precise instrument to measure it, Ye Tian had to test his strength again and again until he could make a reliable estimate. "My base strength used to be 30,000 pounds, he told himself, bewildered. "After this surge from my high-level talent, my physical power has jumped to 300,000 pounds. He stared in disbelief. 300,000 pounds. The scale of the number was hard to grasp. And if he factored in the boost from his yuan power, his pure striking force could approach 600,000 pounds. That put him far beyond the norm. Elite martial artists usually topped out around 100,000 pounds. Many newly promoted fighters could barely match that, and most ordinary practitioners were far weaker. Ye Tian felt the weight of the difference settle on him. This was a leap that changed everything. Those mid-level divine power ants of the fierce beast type are roughly equivalent to an entry-level elite martial artist and should count as primary bloodline talents. But having evolved to the intermediate fierce beast stage, Their boosted power makes them hard for even a veteran martial artist to kill. If those intermediate beasts were any stronger, a single mid-level divine power ant could easily hunt down an ordinary martial artist. Ye Tian finally understood why Qinglao had fled so fast. Had she tried to stand and fight a high-level divine power ant, she probably would have been killed. The high-level ant's strength was terrifying, but their speed and reflexes were still only at the early great martial artist level, insufficient to catch up with the young man. With his strength, Ye Tian could take on ordinary martial artists easily, but he admitted to himself, if a great martial artist runs, I can't stop them, I can't catch up. He had a clear understanding of his own limits. Chapter 35. A great martial artist's raw strength topped out at 1 million pounds of force. With yuan power, it could be pushed to 2 million. That was the upper limit for ordinary martial artists, and by that standard, Ye Tian was at a natural disadvantage. Still, he wasn't helpless. His extraordinary healing talent, combined with the bronze-tier sword technique shadow killing, kept him from being hopelessly outmatched. Shadow killing was a speed-based blade art. It gave a huge boost to attack speed, but very little to raw power. Only if he could raise the technique to its perfected state would it multiply his damage enough to threaten a fully matured great martial artist. Reaching that perfect realm from bronze rank, however, was almost impossible with only the sword power of someone at the peak of the sword realm. The only way would be to abandon cultivation entirely and devote himself single-mindedly to refining the technique, and that was simply not an option for Ye Tian. Unless he copied an advanced or better sword skill talent, or found a blade technique that directly raised attack power, there was no quick way to spike his combat effectiveness. Sword skills that dramatically boost fighting ability are too rare, Ye Tian muttered, frustration in his voice. I've scoured the black market and never seen one. I'll just have to wait. Still, the jump in his combat strength had him excited. He knew, however, that he was still far from truly powerful. There was a long road of improvement ahead. Even small gains mattered. Because of his high-power talent, any increase in raw strength was multiplied. 100 pounds of extra strength felt like 1,000 in practical terms. Add even a modest bonus from shadow killing, and the result was terrifying. My current physical strength is 30,000 pounds, he calculated. If I can reach the peak of an elite martial artist, that should put me on par with the peak combat value of a great martial artist. He allowed himself a brief smile, then returned to a sober assessment. Strength was one thing, speed was another. His speed lagged behind, still noticeably weaker than it needed to be. His speed talent was only a novice one. At best, it could triple his movement speed. That was impressive compared with others at his level, but nowhere near the higher-tier talents that let cultivators move at truly terrifying speeds. Ye Tian made a note to himself. Next time he chose a talent, it would have to be an above-average speed talent. After a few days of training at home, he went out to get a sense of what had happened. He and Windwolf sat in a small private room at a modest restaurant, eating and talking. Windwolf, Ye Tian asked between mouthfuls, I've been cultivating for a few days and haven't been outside. How's the beast cleanup plan going? Windwolf shook his head. My level's too low to know all the details, he said. All I've heard is that 2 bases took heavy losses. They estimate around 50 elite warriors were killed, and 3 great warriors died as well. 3 great warriors died. Ye Tian's fork hovered in midair. Great warriors were walking artillery on the battlefield, the kind of fighters who could turn the tide by themselves. That 3 of them had fallen at once stunned him. He couldn't help but let out a long, troubled sigh. He figured the 3 great warriors had probably been chased off a cliff by the high-level divine force ants. But there's another rumor, Windwolf said, lowering his voice. I heard that soon after, someone from the mid-ranks lost their temper and a grandmaster showed up and struck back. At first, Ye Tian hadn't known what a grandmaster was. The gossip, repeated enough times, finally made it click. So a grandmaster is the level above a great martial artist, he murmured. The grandmaster attacked? Ye Tian asked. What happened? I don't know for sure, Windwolf admitted with a shrug. But it must have ended in their favor. The grandmaster is a whole realm above the great martial artists. How could a high-level divine force ant be a match? Ye Tian nodded. The ants were deadly and hit hard, no question, but they also had glaring weaknesses. Even if their raw power rivaled a Grandmaster's strike, their reflexes and speed were nowhere near human masters. In a head-to-head clash, he figured, the Grandmaster's superior awareness and agility would make the difference. As long as the Sect Master didn't recklessly charge into the high-ranking fierce beasts, he could handle the divine power ants. And that's exactly what happened. 2 days later, a dispatch arrived. The divine power ant lair had been cleared. The greatest threat was gone, and the cleanup of the remaining fierce beasts continued. Because Ye Tian had already finished his assignment, his group no longer needed to go out. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye, and the cleanup was essentially complete. The 2 bases, the coastal base and the medium-sized inland base, temporarily reopened their trade route. That, however, did not mean the danger was gone for good. The beasts were mobile. There might be none one day and a fresh migration the next. For both bases, the route was only safe for now. Anyone traveling it still had to stay alert. Many of the martial artists, Ye Tian included, couldn't quite understand why the coastal base had thrown so much effort into reopening the route. Re-establishing trade with the medium base was obviously beneficial. But what did the coastal base really stand to gain? Trade between a mid-sized base and a coastal outpost never brought in much profit. Still, that day, the Wind Wolf had sent a shipment to Ye Tian's household. Vials of fierce beast blood, slabs of its meat, and a handful of gold cards. The rewards from a mission and the Wind Wolf crew's share from hunting along the way. To Ye Tian, these things were hardly worth mentioning, but he accepted them anyway. He didn't need the supplies for himself, but Ye would soon be ready to start cultivating, and it was useful to leave the resources behind. Ye Tian had planned to return to his quiet cultivation, but the arrival of an unexpected visitor interrupted him. The man was unfamiliar, and his appearance broke the stillness of the house. "Who are you?" Ye Tian asked, eyeing the stranger. "Lord Ye Tian, I am Mo Yuan, the deacon of the Mo family," the man said, bowing slightly. Mo Yuan wore the bearing of a warrior, and he showed Ye Tian a measured respect in his tone and posture. The Mo family. Ye Tian's brow lifted. For a moment his mind flickered to a darker thought. Had the Mo family discovered what happened to Mo Xiaobei? But he dismissed it quickly. If the Mo family truly had found out, they wouldn't send only a warrior, they would have dispatched a higher-ranking figure. "What does your family want with me?" Ye Tian asked, folding his arms and waiting for an explanation. "Our patriarch wants to invite Lord Ye Tian to be a guest of the Mo family," Mo Yuan announced. On the surface, Ye Tian remained composed, but inside he was grinning. The Mo family inviting him as a guest, if they only knew he'd killed Mo Xiaobei, they'd likely be furious. "I'm sorry," Ye Tian said. "I don't wish to go out right now." At that refusal, the deference in Mo Yuan's expression vanished. He blanched. "Lord Ye Tian," he pressed, voice hurried, "the Mo family has many elite martial artists, indeed, a master among them. It would be to your advantage to get on good terms with us. If you offend the Mo family, you won't be able to operate freely in the coastal region." Ye Tian's eyes narrowed. "Who gave you the right to threaten an elite?" A mere family retainer daring to intimidate someone of his caliber was arrogance beyond measure. "Are you threatening me?" he asked coldly. A flash of murderous intent snapped out from Ye Tian like a drawn blade. The pressure hit Mo Yuan all at once. He broke into a cold sweat. Chapter 36. "You can't kill me," Mo Yuan blurted, panic making his voice sharp. "This is Linhai Base. The Lin family has a rule. No warriors may fight at the coastal base, and no one is allowed to kill at will. Break that rule, and the Lins and the other families will punish you." "At a time like this, and you still try to intimidate me?" Ye Tian snapped. "You rely on the Mo family's protection and don't know how small you really are. Today I'll teach you a lesson." He reached out, seized Mo Yuan's arm, and squeezed. There was a sickening crack. Mo Yuan howled in pain as his arm went useless in Ye Tian's grip. It would take an expensive healing relic to put it right, something the Mo family would never waste on a warrior with no potential. They wouldn't pay that price. "Get out." Ye Tian's voice was cold. Mo Yuan dared no more threats. He stared at his ruined arm, swallowed a cry, and crawled out of Ye Tian's courtyard. clutching his side and trying to steady himself as he pulled himself away by his belt. "Mojia, I hope you don't do anything stupid, or else." A blade of killing intent flashed through Ye Tian's gaze. When Mo Yuan staggered back to the estate, the first place he went was to see the head of the Mo family, Mo Changsheng. Mo Changsheng's innate talent wasn't exceptional, only primary level, but under the Mo family's enormous resources, he had managed to cultivate to the early stage of the elite martial artist realm by the age of 30. Progress came slowly after that, but his status in the family was unquestioned. He sat on the family throne because he was the son of Mo Changqing, the Mo family's famed warrior. Mo Changqing had many children. Most of them were of mediocre or poor aptitude. Only a few had primary-level talent, and among those, Mo Changsheng was the best. "Lord, you must do me justice," Mo Yuan wailed. He dragged his injured arm as he burst into the main hall, knelt heavily before Mo Changsheng, and clutched the patriarch's robes with both hands. Mo Changsheng's brow tightened as he took in the sight. "What happened to your arm?" he asked. "Did someone give you trouble?" Mo Yuan's face crumpled. Between sobs, he recounted the encounter with Ye Tian, how Ye Tian had shown outright contempt for the Mo family, how arrogant and dismissive he had been. Every detail came out lacquered with anger and humiliation as Mo Yuan begged the patriarch to punish the insult. Mo Yuan made himself sound utterly blameless, painting Ye Tian as the cruel aggressor who had torn off one of his arms. When he finished, Mo Changsheng simply told him to take the man away and didn't even offer to have the arm treated. "Useless," Mo Changsheng snapped. The insult was aimed at Mo Yuan, useless if he couldn't get things done. He didn't fully buy Mo Yuan's story. As head of the family, he knew Mo Yuan's temper and suspected he'd provoked Ye Tian. And Ye Tian had flatly refused the Ye family's invitation. Otherwise, Mo Yuan wouldn't have dared to offend him. "Humph," Mo Changsheng thought bitterly. "An elite martial artist has the nerve to reject our Ye family? If father hadn't performed those arcane rites and burned away his lifespan to buy us time, why would I be bothering with outsiders?" Only a handful of people knew the truth behind the invitation. Even many of the Mo family's high elders were kept in the dark. Mo Changqing returned. He hadn't died during the mission to encircle and suppress the divine power ants, but he had paid a terrible price. To outrun those high-level ferocious beasts, he had cast a forbidden speed spell that burned away a portion of his own lifespan. The family healer's examination was grim. He had, at most, 1 year left to live. Mo Changsheng understood the implications all too well. Without a great warrior to lead, the Mo family's position would quickly deteriorate. The Ye family had made enemies of too many clans. If those houses banded together against the Mo's, the consequences would be disastrous. Strengthening the family's power was urgent, and Ye Tian looked like the best choice. Ye Tian was impressively young. According to the reports, he was only 16, yet he had already reached elite martial rank. Even his baseline aptitude ranked as a high cultivation talent, and he possessed a rare speed talent, a gift that had been openly revealed during the Divine Power Ant mission, witnessed by many martial artists. For Mo Changsheng, those qualities made Ye Tian an obvious candidate to shore up the Mo family's future. Speed talent and an advanced cultivation aptitude, and on top of that, a plain background. A genius like Ye Tian was exactly the sort of prize every powerful clan wanted to recruit. If the Mo family could win him over and, more importantly, bind him to them, they would gain a trump card that could secure the clan's fortunes for decades. But to keep him, they had to act while he was still obscure. Once Ye Tian rose, he would be much harder to control. Mo Changsheng left at a brisk pace and headed for the underground chamber deep within the Mo compound. The passage smelled faintly of medicinal herbs. Torches flickered against damp stone. In the inner room, he found his father, Mo Changqing, sitting propped against a low cot, his robes stained with blood as bandages covered fresh wounds. "Father," Mo Changsheng said as he shut the door behind him. Mo Yuan screwed up. Mo Changqing's eyes narrowed. "Screwed up?" He smiled without warmth. "Not surprising. Geniuses like him always carry a streak of arrogance. They look down on the Mo clan and refuse invitations. It's normal they turn us down. Even if he won't come to our family willingly, we can still make sure he has no choice later. Then we should strike while he's still unknown," Mo Changsheng urged. Let the Lin family take the lead in sanctioning Ye Tian. After what happened with Mo Yuan, after Ye Tian publicly ruined his standing, that gives us the perfect pretext. Mo Changqing considered the idea, fingers tightening around the bandage. He knew the Lin family's influence could be useful, and having another clan publicly condemn Ye Tian would justify harsher measures from a position of so-called righteousness. If they could force Ye Tian into a corner now, the Mo family's hold over him could be secured before he had the chance to become powerful. Very well, Mo Changqing said at last, voice low and steady. Arrange for it. Let the Lin family make the first move. We will make sure Ye Tian learns what it means to oppose the Mo clan. Stupid. Mo Changqing took a long drink. Mo Yuan? What is Mo Yuan compared to this? He's just an ordinary martial artist. But look at Ye Tian. His talent is off the charts. He's bound to become a true great, someone who can fight at the very peak. The Lin family won't be able to handle someone like that. They'll try to recruit him. Right now, the Lin family is distracted by the two bases, but once they're finished, Ye Tian won't be ours anymore. Mo Changsheng's face went pale, and he bowed his head. Father told me to gather men and capture Ye Tian. Mo Changqing's eyes glinted. Good, I've got something that will make that easy. He produced a small vial. This is a poison that erases Lingji. I bought it from the big base at great cost. After you capture Ye Tian, make him ingest it. It will wipe out most of his Lingji. He'll be temporarily insane, and his memories will be muddled, though his raw talent won't be harmed. When he's nearly recovered, we'll put him through the dead soldier training method. By then we can break him and train him to obey us completely. This is perfect, far better than the old method of poisoning someone and handing out antidotes now and then. Mo Changsheng was thrilled. After confiscating the toxin that neutralized the Lingji, he left and set the arrest of Ye Tian in motion. Late that night, the Mo family sent out 10 elite warriors. 2 of them had special talents. One possessed a second-tier poison talent, the other a primary sword talent, and had trained in a powerful black iron-grade sword technique designed to boost attack strength. Although those 2 were only early-stage elite practitioners, their actual fighting ability matched that of mid-stage elites. 2 more of the 10 were genuinely mid-stage elites, so in terms of fighting power, the group was roughly equivalent to 4 mid-stage elites and 6 early-stage elites. That was enough to take on a late-stage elite, and more than sufficient to overpower an early-stage elite who specialized in speed. Little did they know what kind of evil they were about to face. Chapter 37. The central garden complex was a string of independent villas, each enclosed behind its own high wall. Tonight, 10 of the Mo family's elite warriors had gathered outside one such villa, Ye Tian's. Their commander was the Mo family's first elder, Mo Xingchen, a seasoned middle-stage martial artist. He had plenty of battlefield experience, though no extraordinary innate talent. He laid out the plan in a low voice. There are only 2 people in the villa, Ye Tian and his younger sister, Ye Yu. Ye Yu is under 15, not a cultivator, just an ordinary child. We'll capture Ye Yu first and use her to force Ye Tian to surrender. Under no circumstances are you to harm her. If Ye Tian loses control, we'll have real trouble. Yes, Grand Elder, the others murmured. Silently, the 10 warriors scaled the wall and slipped toward the villa. The Mo family had already investigated Ye Tian's household and knew exactly which room Ye Yu occupied, so this operation should be straightforward. They moved like shadows toward the windows of the designated room, every step practiced and precise. Several of them pushed open Ye Yu's door and swept the room, but it was empty. No, Ye Yu doesn't sleep here, one of the men called out, trying to cover their mistake. Mo Xingchen felt his heart drop. Elite fighters had hearing far keener than ordinary people. Even the faintest sound might have woken anyone inside. If they'd been heard, the house could be alerted in an instant. A cold voice cut through the night from nearby. Do you really have the nerve to break into my Ye Tian's villa? They spilled into the courtyard and saw Ye Tian standing there, calm but furious, his eyes sharp and lethal. He had insisted that Ye Yu stay in a room next to his own for tonight. He'd expected the Mo family might try a sneak attack, and now that precaution had proven wise. If Ye Yu had been sleeping alone in his original room, he might already have been taken. Move. Mo Xingchen barked, and the attackers surged forward. Footsteps thudded, and the air filled with the crackle of released martial power as the two sides collided. Boom! Boom! An elite warrior lunged at Ye Tian, racing to take him down. "Find death!" someone shouted. Ye Tian gave a cold hum. He had no blade in his hand, but he didn't need one. "Speed talent," he called. He blurred into an afterimage and flashed past an elite fighter at a velocity far beyond a normal warrior's. His right hand transformed into a razor and sliced across the man's throat. The blade never left his grip. He had fully unleashed his talent. With a thunderous rip, the man's neck was severed and his body exploded backward. In an instant, more fighters were sent flying, collapsing to the ground as corpses. None of them could stand against Ye Tian. Even the elite swordsman, famed for his technique, was smashed by a single strike. His yuan energy shattered and his skull crushed. In the blink of an eye, only 2 elite figures remained on the field, Grand Elder Mo Xingchen and 10 Elder Mo En. Mo Xingchen and Mo En were both mid-level elite fighters of the Mo family, strong in their own right, but like ants compared to Ye Tian. "No way! How can you be this strong?" they cried, stunned. Ye Tian wasn't supposed to be at the very top of the elite ranks, so none of them expected what came next. He cut down 8 ordinary elite fighters as if they were nothing, and even killed the 2 so-called death warriors the Mo family had trained. Elite fighters with special talents whose combat effectiveness equaled any of the others. Those 2 should have been able to hold their own in a life-or-death clash, yet Ye Tian dispatched them without mercy. That kind of power and the techniques he used were beyond ordinary elite martial artists. Only a great martial artist could perform them. Before Mo Xingchen had time to gather his wits, Ye Tian struck. 2 lightning-fast blows, and both Mo Xingchen and Mo En were gone. The Mo family's 10 elite martial artists didn't even have a chance to beg for mercy. One after another, I collapsed, dead. "Brother, what happened?" Ye Yu rubbed her eyes and stepped out of the room. When she saw the corpses on the floor, she screamed. "Brother, why are there so many bodies?" Ye Yu's face went pale. She wasn't afraid while her brother stood beside her. She knew how powerful he was, but seeing this many corpses for the first time left her shaken. "What happened?" she whispered. "They tried to go against me," Ye Tian said plainly, "so I killed them." He glanced at her. "Xiao Yu, I'm going out to handle something. Aren't you afraid to be home alone?" Ye Yu clenched her small fists and forced a steady voice. "Xiao Yu isn't afraid." "All right, I'll be back soon." With that, he melted into the shadows and vanished into the night. Once he was gone, Ye Yu's fear hardened into determination. "Brother, soon Xiao Yu will start cultivating. Then she won't need your protection. She'll be able to protect you and take care of the bad people, too." Down on the seaside base's street, the same black silhouette moved swiftly. On his face was a grim mask he'd just taken from a closed mask shop, perfect for hiding his identity as he slipped through the dark. He had planned to tear the Mo family apart overnight, but wiping out every single member wasn't possible, and he needed to hide who he was. He didn't intend to slaughter them all at once, he just wouldn't give them the chance to flee. They had the gall to come after him tonight, and he would cut down the Mo family's leadership before dawn. At his speed, Ye Tian reached the Mo compound quickly. Inside, several of the family's senior members hadn't slept. They waited tensely in the main hall for word from Mo Xingchen. The Mo household had always possessed a significant number of elite fighters. Although a few had fallen in recent battles against the ferocious beasts, and 10 more had just been slain by Ye Tian, nearly 20 elite practitioners still remained on the estate. Some of those remaining were hardened veterans, the family's concealed strength, unknown to outsiders. At full strength, the Mo family had boasted a grandmaster and more than 30 elite martial artists, a terrifying force when intact. Because of Ye Tian's earlier provocation, the Mo family's prestige had already taken a hit, but the elders still didn't realize a crisis was about to descend on them. A piercing scream ripped through the Mo compound. Mo Changsheng and the others in the main hall stiffened, exchanging alarmed looks. "No, someone's attacking the Mo residence." The doors to the hall crashed open as several people barreled out toward the source of the screams. Warriors from around the compound, roused from their beds, stumbled into the courtyard in pajamas and armor, weapons in hand. The Mo family was one of the great houses of the coastal base, counted among the top 10, and no one expected to be struck in the dead of night. The audacity of an attacker like this was unthinkable. The insult to the Mo family's authority demanded blood. Mo Changsheng, already ill-tempered, bellowed at the assembled guards. His voice rolled through the compound like thunder. Whoever dares attack the Mo family will die. Chapter 38. Here they come. Ye Tian glanced up as a line of figures sprinted toward him, elite martial artists from the Mo family. He had already killed an ordinary Mo family fighter and was standing his ground, waiting for their response. He forced a breath and braced himself. The first 4 attackers arrived together, all at the early stage of elite martial artists. Without hesitation, they shouted, "Kill!" and moved to encircle him. Shadow kill! A streak of swordlight cut the air. In an instant, the 4 elite fighters were cleanly decapitated by Chi-Chi's strike. Their bodies fell in a row to the ground. More reinforcements came pouring in immediately. The rest of the Mo family's elite and a large number of ordinary martial artists. They stared in stunned silence at the scene. The lone corpse where an ordinary fighter had fallen, and the 4 elite corpses laid out like cut trees. "Who are you?" someone demanded, voice trembling. Mo Changsheng pushed through the crowd and arrived as well. His expression was grim, edged with apprehension. He himself was only in the early stage of elite martial artists, roughly the same level as the 4 who had just been slain, so he knew, with a sinking certainty, that he stood no chance against Ye Tian. Ye Tian said nothing. He surged forward at once, cutting straight through the ranks of the Mo family's fighters. He didn't want to give them a moment to scatter. If any of the senior Mo members slipped away, the outcome would be ruined. His objective was clear: eliminate the Mo family's leaders as quickly as possible. "Surround him," Mo Changsheng barked. A dozen or so elite family warriors lunged forward to intercept Ye Tian, but he moved too fast, and his power far outstripped that of ordinary martial artists. In an instant, his sword flashed. One elite fell where he stood, then another. Within heartbeats, more than a dozen of the Mo family's best lay dead. The regular warriors fared even worse. Ye Tian cut them down by the score. The force of his sword momentum and the eruption of sword chi left no room for retreat. The blast swept over the entire courtyard, turning the place into a slaughterhouse. "Demon!" Mo Changsheng screamed, panic breaking his voice. He bolted toward where Mo Changqing stood, desperate. "Father, save me!" he howled, his plea full of terror. Ye Tian's pace wasn't enough to keep up with the distance closing. After a few breaths, he had crossed the yard and caught up to Mo Changsheng. "Stop!" he shouted. From deeper inside the Mo residence, another voice rang out, urgent, hoarse. It was Mo Changqing. "Die!" came the cry. At about 10 meters away, a volley of shadow blades flashed through the air like a thrown knife. In an instant, the light stung the air, and a chill swept through the surrounding tens of meters. Mo Changsheng froze in place as if time itself had stalled. The next moment his body was cleaved in two and collapsed to the ground, dead, indisputably gone. "Son!" Mo Changqing's scream tore through the compound. Seeing his child killed before his eyes drove him past reason. "I'll make you pay with your life." He began to chant an arcane spell. A blood-red mist enveloped him. His skin withered as the magic consumed him, but his breath and ferocity only intensified. Where he had once possessed a strength rating of 150,000, the spell doubled it, pushing him to 300,000, and his speed surged with it. With a thunderous roar, Mo Changqing hurled himself forward. His yuanli coalesced into a titanic fist that seemed to freeze the very air as it barreled toward Ye Tian. The force behind Mo Changqing's punch had been amplified by 600,000 pounds through his yuan power, more than enough to seriously injure an ordinary early-stage martial artist. But Ye Tian's attack exceeded even that. "Shadow kill!" Ye Tian shouted, and a brilliant blade of light sprang up to meet Mo Changqing's blow. The impact detonated through the air. A concussive shockwave rolled outward, shattering nearby houses. Several ordinary residents and lower-ranked martial artists of the Mo family were blasted lifeless. This was a clash at the level of a great martial artist, far beyond what civilians could withstand. When the smoke cleared, Ye Tian had taken only a few calm steps back. Mo Changqing, however, had been thrown backward by the blade. A scorched slash marred his chest, and he was badly wounded. Mo Changqing stared at him, pale with disbelief. A great martial artist. Impossible. There's no one among the great martial artists in the Linhai base who uses sword techniques. Who are you? He sounded terrified. Ye Tian only sneered. It was obvious Mo Changqing had assumed he was a great martial artist, and the contempt in Ye Tian's expression said he either did not correct him or found the mistake amusing. Ye Tian was, in fact, astonishingly like a great martial artist. His power had already reached that level, and his speed was only marginally slower. Because Mo Changqing hadn't bothered to probe with his spiritual senses, he hadn't detected how close Ye Tian really was. Ye Tian gave no answer. He simply pressed the attack. The bronze-level shadow-killing sword technique moved so fast that even Mo Changqing, a great martial artist, could barely parry it. Ye Tian's only real shortcomings were slightly less speed and limited combat experience. In every other respect, his strength overwhelmed Mo. Mo Changqing's advantages, his speed and hard-won experience, were useless against such a gulf in raw power. Suddenly, one of Mo Changqing's arms was severed. He was grievously wounded. "No, I can't beat him. I have to get away." Mo Changqing forced himself backward and fled, blood trailing as he dragged his shattered body away from the Mo compound. He ran toward the outer edge of the coastal base, in the direction of the Lin family, the only people there who might be able to protect him. Whether the Lins would actually give him refuge was another matter entirely. Ye Tian had been in pursuit the whole time, but Mo Changqing's speed kept him just out of reach. He was about to give up when suddenly Mo Changqing's pace dropped sharply. His secret technique must have ended, Ye Tian realized. Without that art, Mo Changqing was far slower than Ye Tian. It had been the technique alone that let him match Ye Tian's movements. Now he was a sitting duck. Ye Tian closed the distance and at last overtook him. Mo Changqing went to his knees and begged, "Please, spare me." "Die!" Ye Tian answered without hesitation and slashed. As Mo Changqing fell, an iron ball sprang into his hand. It split open with a crack, and a spray of fine steel needles shot out. They moved too fast, and Ye Tian was too close. Several of the needles sank into him. Against a lesser fighter, the needles would have been easy to dodge. Ye Tian, however, was only an early-stage elite martial artist. His reactions weren't quite sharp enough. Several steel needles came too fast to evade, so he opened his Yuan Force shield. Then the impossible happened. The needles punched through the barrier and drove straight into him. Ye Tian stared in shock. What a powerful, dark weapon. The needles had pierced his body and torn through his organs, but his top-tier healing talent kicked in. In the space of heartbeats, his wounds stabilized and then closed completely, the recovery astonishingly rapid. By then, Mo Changqing was already dead, cut down by Ye Tian's sword. His corpse was riddled with the same steel needles. The iron ball he had been carrying lay split open. Inside it sat an incomparably intricate mechanism, fashioned from some unknown metal. "It must be one of those disposable dark weapons," Ye Tian said, rubbing his chest. "I don't know where Mo Changqing got it, but these things fire in all directions at random. They'll even hit the user. No wonder Mo Changqing never used it. It's a suicide weapon." He felt foolish and lucky at the same time. If he hadn't possessed such exceptional healing talent, the carelessness would have cost him his life today. He glanced around the clearing and muttered, "Every heavyweight seems to carry their own secret trump card." Ye Tian searched Mo Changqing's body. Besides a single gold card, there was nothing. The rest of Mo Changqing's possessions were probably kept by the Mo family. Now, however, it wasn't the time to go to them. The Mo clan's recent moves had drawn a lot of attention at the coastal base. They probably had people gathered watching the aftermath. Go home, he decided. Sister Yeyu was alone, and it would be better to return early and put her mind at ease. Chapter 39. A crowd had gathered outside the Mo family compound, though most people barely dared to step inside. Only a handful of senior warriors from the larger clans lingered at the threshold before. After a long hesitation, they moved slowly into the courtyard. What met them stopped them cold. The Mo household had been ravaged. Apart from the women, children, and a few unarmed servants, the the family's leaders and fighting men lay dead or dying. Bodies were heaped together. Wounded groaned softly beneath the still air. The scene of slaughter was so complete it looked almost like an extermination. The elders and the head of the Mo family, "They're dead," someone shouted, having found the bodies of Mo Changsheng and the others. At that moment, a new presence arrived, a tall, commanding figure from the Lin family. As the dominant clan of the Linhai base, the Lin family had to appear after such a shocking event. The assembled warriors snapped to attention. "Lord Linzai," they called. Linzai swept his gaze over the ruined courtyard, inclined his head once, and began to inspect the corpses. "There can only be one killer," Linzai said. All the fighters were cut down with the same blade. The cuts show a terrifying level of blade technique. This isn't a common thug's knife work. It has to be the hand of a true master, a great warrior skilled in swordcraft. Those gathered mulled it over. "A great warrior?" someone echoed. "There aren't any like that stationed at the coastal base." "But the Mo family does have a master," another reminded them. "What about him?" "Why not ask the Mo household directly?" suggested someone else. "Someone there must have seen something." They followed that advice and sought out the Mo family. After questioning the survivors, they pieced together the story and reported back. "Lord Lin," one of the warriors said, "to be clear, a man wearing a ghost mask broke into the Mo household. None of their fighters could stand against him, not even the Mo family's master, Mo Changqing. He was forced to flee, and the killer chased after him. That way." The warrior pointed toward the east. The Lin family compound stood to the east, but there was more than one road that led there. Linzai had taken a different route, and so had missed whatever had happened. "Lord Linzai, shall we go have a look?" an elite warrior asked in a low voice. They were curious and afraid. Rumor had it the attacker was a fearsome martial artist who could fell an elite fighter in an instant. They did not know as yet that Mo Changqing's fate had already been sealed. "Go and see," Linzai replied lightly. "That man likely has a vendetta against the Mo family. He'll only be after them. We have no quarrel with him, so we shouldn't be his target. Besides, I'm a senior warrior of the Lin family. No one's foolish enough to pick a fight with us. Come with me." So a group of Lin warriors fell in behind him and hurried on. Blood stained the path where an injured Mo Changqing had fled, and the trail led them straight to his body. "Mo Changqing is dead," someone cried, voice cracking. One of the elite warriors went pale and broke out in a cold sweat. He had never thought he would see a level like this in his lifetime. To Linzai, a great martial artist, was almost divine, untouchable, and yet now that same divine figure lay dead before him. The shock hit him like a physical blow. Linzai stepped forward and knelt to inspect Mo Changqing's body. The skin looked prematurely aged, as if burned from within. "He must have used a secret technique," Linzai murmured as he examined the signs. "There are rumors that Mo Changqing mastered a method that burns one's life force to temporarily boost strength. This looks like it. It would explain the accelerated aging. Even so, the fact that Mo, a man capable of secret arts, had still fallen or could only think to flee in the end, spoke volumes about the opponent's power. One detail puzzled him. Why had the killer chased Mo after already injuring him? Would a sane attacker risk pursuit if the victim was already wounded? Perhaps, Linzai thought, the murderer was hurt as well, desperate, reckless. He glanced again at Mo's hand and noticed the iron ball clenched there. A puncture from a metal needle marred the corpse's torso, and tiny steel needles were scattered and embedded in the nearby wall. The scene hinted at a concealed projectile weapon, and at a fight that had been vicious, sudden, and close. "This is the iron pear bead, a dark weapon," Linzai murmured, staring at it. "They say it comes from some unknown force. It's one of those deadlier dark weapons, devastating at close range. Even a great warrior can't easily escape its strike. Only someone at the absolute peak of that rank has a chance." Seeing the legendary weapon with his own eyes for the first time left him speechless. From the condition of the body, it was clear Mo Changqing had activated the bead as his last act and successfully detonated it. The user of the weapon wasn't dead, though. He must have survived, but was probably badly wounded. Lin's expression hardened. He couldn't care less that the Mo family had nearly been wiped out, but the fact that such a mysterious fighter had appeared at the coastal base without the Lin family's knowledge was troubling. Who was this person? Why eliminate the Mo family? Would the Lin family be next? Those were questions that needed answering. "I'll head back first," Lin said, and left at once. "Isn't the Mo family's leadership almost wiped out? Aren't there any martial artists left in the Mo family?" Someone asked aloud. The question was like a spark in dry grass. As soon as it was spoken, a number of martial artists slipped back into the Mo compound under cover of night. Their purpose was obvious. Only hours after the family had suffered that slaughter, they now endured a second crime, a night of looting. How many had come, nobody could say. In the confusion, valuables vanished, and no one could point to the thieves. Even if the Lin family tried to investigate later, there would be no one to find. Whoever had taken something would deny it. Who would stand up for a family already fallen? The problem went deeper than stolen goods. Many houses in the coastal stronghold had once dared not cross the Mo family because of Mo Changqing and the Mo elite. With Mo Changqing dead and the family's top fighters gone, that fear evaporated. The Mo family had become a soft target, a ripe persimmon everyone felt free to squeeze. Their ability to hold their position in the coastal base was suddenly in doubt. In every practical sense, the Mo family had been driven out of the coastal stronghold and reduced to little more than a name back home. Ye Tian had taken care of the 10 elite fighters from the Mo family and disposed of their bodies, scattered them across different streets so they would be found like any other victims of that bloody night. Given how many had already died within the Mo clan that night, 10 more corpses would draw little special attention. The next morning, he left the house as if nothing had happened, strolled about, then came back to resume his cultivation as usual. Meanwhile, the Lin family was in session, discussing the fallout from the Mo family massacre. Linzai stood before his eldest brother, Lin Wanli, the Lin clan's strongest, and reported what he had learned. "Brother Wanli, based on my investigation last night and the Mo family's own inquiries overnight, I first thought this was a vendetta. But who the killer is remains unclear. There are too many people with motive, yet none of them seem to have the power to wipe out the Mo family." Linzai sounded helpless. Lin Wanli studied him for a moment and asked, "Is anyone particularly suspicious? Any sign this was personal, a grudge or vendetta? Suspicious, or just a coincidence?" Lin mulled it over for a moment, then a thought struck him. "Big brother, there are still a few martial artists left in the Mo family. One of them is named Mo Yuan. From him, I heard something that might be connected to this whole affair, but I don't think whoever's behind it has the power to destroy the entire Mo family." Chapter 40. What do you mean by intelligence? Lin Wanli asked, curiosity bright in his eyes. "Do you know Ye Tian?" His elder brother considered for a moment. "Ye Tian? I remember Mingji mentioning him. Extremely talented. He isn't even 17 yet, and he already has the strength of an elite martial artist. His innate aptitude must be at least a high-level cultivation talent, maybe even higher. It could also be a rare opportunity, which would explain how he's progressed so fast." "Big brother," Lin Wanli said earnestly, "Ye Tian's talent has to be above the high cultivation level. If someone's aptitude is low, no amount of resources will help. The lower the talent, the less efficient the refining of those resources. Ye Tian's ability is that exceptional, which is why the Mo family has been watching him." "You heard about that?" the elder brother asked. "Yesterday," Lin Wanli replied, "the Mo family sent Mo Yuan to invite Ye Tian to join them. Mo Yuan said they wanted to bring Ye Tian under their control, but Ye Tian didn't even bother considering it. He flat out refused and sent Mo Yuan away. It was precisely because Mo Yuan was ruined that he didn't take part in last night's battle. Otherwise he'd have died," Linzai said. "He was lucky to survive." "Interesting." Lin Wanli's interest sharpened. "So according to your information, something happened to the Mo family at Ye Tian's place. Ye Tian himself seems unharmed, yet the Mo family has been destroyed. Ye Tian alone might not have the power to wipe out a whole clan, but this certainly implicates him in some way." "Do you want to arrest Ye Tian?" Linzai asked. Lin Wanli sneered. "Are you mad? Do you think because Ye Tian is gifted he'll one day threaten the Lin family, so we should just eliminate him now? That's childish. He leaned back. Listen to me. Geniuses are never scarce. If we start killing or imprisoning every talented person we encounter, we're bound to miss one. And the day we do, the Lin family is finished. The right move with people like Ye Tian is to recruit them or make allies of them. Do you remember Haija, the man who dominated the coastal sector 50 years ago? We didn't beat him down. We either brought him in or kept him friendly. Treat Ye Tian the same way. Back then, the Hai family was even stronger than we are now, Lin Wanli said. They had 10 great warriors, and then they were wiped out overnight. The Hai family? Lindsay's eyes narrowed as a memory snapped into place. He had heard the story before. The Hai family had killed a prodigy with extraordinary cultivation. That prodigy wasn't an ordinary fighter, but someone backed by one of the great sects. A powerful master came because of him, and the Hai family paid the price. I understand, Lindsay said, his heart pounding. Good, Lin Wanli replied, pleased at his brother's quick grasp. But we should look into Ye Tian. It's not unreasonable to suspect he might be that kind of prodigy. If he is, the Lin family should have known about him already, and yet we didn't. We only learned of him because of this fierce beast cleanup. Without that mission, who knows how long it would have gone unnoticed. He leaned forward. Ye Tian's a martial artist. He'll frequent the black market, and Wu Gei is where someone like him would be seen most. We've done business with Wu Jie before. Ask them. They'll have leads. I'll go to Wu Jie now, Lindsay said without hesitation, then hurried off. Half a day later, Lindsay returned. Big brother, I asked the head of the Wu Pavilion, but... Lindsay's voice trailed off. He looked embarrassed but serious. Do you think Ye Tian's background could be something special? Lin Wanli asked, brow furrowed. Lindsay nodded eagerly. You're right. Ye Tian often hunts fierce beasts and sells them to Master Wu. Master Wu already knew that Ye Tian could take down intermediate fierce beasts, but he never told the big families about it. That's not unusual. Master Wu runs a business. He doesn't involve himself in coastal-based politics. But when I went to see heck on Ye Tian this time, the head of the Wu Pavilion actually warned me not to offend him. What? Do you mean Ye Tian joined the Wu Pavilion? Lin Wanli's surprise was obvious. It wasn't impossible. Ye Tian's talent was exceptional, at least on par with Lin Wanli's. But he was younger, more impressionable, and his speed talent showed even greater potential. A genius like that would be a natural recruit for the Wu Pavilion. No, Wu Ge did try to recruit Ye Tian, but Ye Tian refused. Still, a top prodigy from the Great Base headquarters came to our Linhai base not long ago, and when he left, he instructed the Linhai martial commander to keep an eye on Ye Tian, Lin Wanli said, disbelief in his voice. One of the Great Base's martial cabinet corps members, could it be? He thought for a moment, then nodded. It has to be Yu Ling, the Yu family's eldest lady. The Yu family is enormous. Any master they send could sweep through our entire base. I didn't expect Miss Yu Ling to know Ye Tian. If their relationship is as close as this implies, anyone at Linhai who tried to move against Ye Tian would be courting the Yu family's wrath. The thought made Lindsay shiver. Thanks to his older brother's warning, he'd held back. Otherwise, if he'd made even a small, secret move against Ye Tian, the angel, the Lin family might already be doomed. Suddenly, he found himself thinking of the Mo family. Big brother, do you mean the Mo family is... Before Lindsay could finish, Lin Wanli cut him off. Enough. That matter is closed. It's not ours to debate. The Mo family members who remain can fend for themselves, and there are plenty of Mo families down at the coastal base anyway. Understood, Lindsay replied. Lin Wanli sighed. Our real problem is the Iron Tooth base. It's a medium-sized base, 2 masters, a population of about 600,000, and huge resources all around it. To open that trade route they're asking for, they expect the Lin family to give up a lot. Their motives aren't simple, and we can't agree to those terms. Doing so would put us at odds with Iron Tooth. Could Iron Tooth attack us? Lindsay asked, frowning. No, not openly, Lin Wanli said softly. Major bases don't wage open war against each other. It's a rule even the largest bases follow. Iron Tooth doesn't have the nerve for a full-scale assault. Still, that doesn't mean they have no other designs. I've already planted people inside Iron Tooth. We should have news soon. Hopefully there won't be any accidents, Lin thought, anxious but hopeful. In the blink of an eye, a week passed. Ye Tian found that nothing had happened. Not a single person from the Lin family had come. That was exactly what he wanted. No trouble, and the freedom to continue his cultivation in peace. During that week, he'd been busy for another reason as well. He'd purchased a supply of black market supplements rumored to accelerate the development of young female disciples, allowing them to begin cultivation months or even a year earlier without damaging their foundational roots. Many powerful clans used these methods to give their prodigies an edge, and Ye Tian had decided to try the same. He fed the supplements to Ye, giving her as many doses as the tests recommended. After a period of observation, the results were clear. Ye was finally able to begin cultivating.